In Marvel, I am Homelander. Hello again, dear adventurers of the multiverse. Thanks for joining us once more on this epic journey. Remember, this story is pure science fiction from our wild imagination. So don't go trying to summon dragons in your backyard. The rights of this amazing novel belong entirely to its original author. We are only the narrators. Do you want more adventures? Show some love to our YouTube channel with a subscription and a like. And if you want exclusive content, our Patreon is waiting for you with open arms. Chapter 26. He still has to thank me. Late at night, in a VIP ward at the hospital, Kingpin, his body wrapped in bandages, was suffering from poor sleep. Opening his eyes, he saw a dark figure standing before his bed. "Good evening, Kingpin," John greeted him casually. But Kingpin's mood was far from relaxed. The moment he saw his nemesis, cold sweat instantly soaked through his bandages. "What do you want?" Kingpin tried to get up defensively, but the intense pain told him he was no match for his opponent. "What do I want?" John's tone grew colder. "That's a question for you. First, you hired online trolls to smear me, then you had your gangsters threaten shop owners to prevent me from doing good deeds. Don't you know you're testing my limits?" John's tone was stern. He grabbed Kingpin by the neck, lifting his 400-pound body. Kingpin endured the excruciating pain, grabbing John's right hand, but he couldn't budge him. He could only watch helplessly as John dragged him towards the balcony outside the ward. With John gripping Kingpin's throat, he dangled Kingpin's massive body over the balcony railing. A slight loosening of his grip would send Kingpin plummeting to the ground from a height of over 20 meters. "Kingpin, you can't do this!" Kingpin cried out in panic, feeling the emptiness beneath his feet. His body was severely injured. He had no chance of surviving a fall those dozens of meters. He'd rather be beaten up by Kingpin than jump, at least, based on the available information. The other man had no record of death. "Now you're scared? Where were you before?" John's expression was unusually cold. "If you used sneak attacks, assassinations, or poisoning, I wouldn't care. But you've resorted to such underhanded tactics. In that case, I'd like to play a game with you. To be honest, I can't be sure if you'll die instantly from this fall." John said things that terrified Kingpin. "But if the outcome is certain, how can it be called a game? If you survive, remember to tell your men to behave themselves. Crime is fine, assassination is okay, but don't do anything that makes things too difficult for me." John smiled and released Kingpin's grip, letting his body fall freely. "No!" Kingpin screamed, watching the ground rapidly approaching. He endured the pain, raised his right hand, and slammed his fist into the ground. Boom! The entire building heard a clear tremor. Almost all the kinetic energy was transferred to Kingpin's right arm, causing it to snap instantly, but it also reduced the force of the fall by almost 90%, allowing him to survive. "System, progress bar," John said calmly on the rooftop. 24.57%, 25.62%. This monster's experience points are pretty high. It's only been a day and it's already gained so much experience. "This is more than I gained in over a week," John chuckled to himself. All the points he'd lost earlier were now back. John jumped off the balcony, landing beside Kingpin. Looking at his mangled appearance, riddled with open wounds, it was horrifying, but he wasn't quite dead yet. Kingpin's breath was weak, a flicker of lingering fear in his eyes. "Isn't that Kingpin? Tisk tisk tisk, how did you end up like this? Which bastard did this to you?" John asked, feigning surprise. Kingpin watched his nemesis's performance with half-open eyes, trying his best to maintain his life force, remaining silent, like a salty, fat-headed fish gazing at the stars. "Tisk, boring." John curled his lip, looking at the nurse who had rushed over to check on the situation. "This is Mr. Wilson from the 14th floor. He fell off the balcony while sleepwalking. Get him to the emergency room immediately." "Boss." At this moment, Kingpin's men who were guarding him also rushed down. They immediately froze when they saw Kingpin's nemesis beside him. "I just came over to chat with him, nothing else. Remember to advise your boss to do evil properly and not to do those crooked things." John waved his hand, pretending to have just passed by. "Chat." These men didn't dare to say a word when they saw Kingpin's miserable state. A clever man helped the nurse lift Kingpin onto a stretcher, while respectfully saying to the nemesis, "Thank you for your evaluation. We will definitely try our best to improve. Don't worry, I will come to visit often. I hope that next time I come here, I will find that you have corrected your mistakes." John waved his hand. How could he let go of this level of experienced monster? He would definitely have to farm it every few days. He believed that it wouldn't be long before he could finish the first stage. After speaking, he swaggered out of the hospital, leaving his underlings with stiff expressions, and no one dared to stop him. 2 hours later, Kingpin, who had been rescued from critical condition again, looked at his amputated right arm and said with resentment in his eyes, "I must kill my nemesis." Kingpin asked his men, "Where are the men I sent out? Did they rescue Ivan? Just 3 hours ago, they successfully kidnapped Ivan from Hammer Industries." "He's waiting for our message," the underling replied respectfully. "Then bring him up now," Kingpin said. "Yes, sir," the manager replied, bowing his head and stepping back. A dozen minutes later, a man with a bag over his head and wearing prison clothes was brought in by 2 underlings. Kingpin lay on the hospital bed, slightly raising his head. His underlings immediately understood and pulled off the hood, revealing the man's unkempt, weathered face. Ivan Vanko, son of Russian scientist Anton Vanko, built a replica reactor to assassinate Tony Stark in Monaco to avenge his father, but was stopped by the Costas. "Am I right?" Kingpin said slowly. "You're right, but I didn't expect the person who rescued me to be a cripple lying in a hospital bed." Ivan sat on the edge of the bed, a toothpick dangling from his mouth, his tone flippant. "I think you should watch your tone. No one has ever dared to speak to me like that." Although Kingpin was lying in bed, his authority remained undiminished. "I'm here to ask you to help me deal with the Costas. I hope you can agree readily." The Costas, Ivan thought of the masked man in black who stood in front of Stark. If it weren't for the man's intervention, Stark would have been killed by him. "That's right. I only want his life, so I need your technical assistance. If you're willing, I will give you everything you need," Kingpin said generously. As for the consequences if Ivan refused, he didn't say. "Everyone seems to be reading so quietly. I'm begging for your monthly votes and recommendations. I'm practically begging you." Chapter 27 Gwen's New Clothes. What if I don't agree? Faced with Kingpin's invitation, Ivan wanted to test his freedom under Kingpin's command and refused. Kingpin didn't care about Ivan's refusal at all, a knowing smile spreading across his face, which was now a swollen mess. "You'll agree. I believe in your pain tolerance. You'll agree to any request, even eating shit." Knowing that his future boss was not easy to deal with, Ivan, who had some worries about the future, sighed and said, "All right, I agree to cooperate with you, but I hope you can promise to help me kill Iron Man after it's done." "No problem." Kingpin agreed without hesitation. "To complete the goal as soon as possible, you can go to work now. What do you need?" "Weapons, materials, and a large amount of palladium to build a reactor." Ivan stated his request. "My men will provide those. You can go to the lab with them." Kingpin gave him the hint to leave. After Ivan left, the manager approached respectfully and said, "Boss, regarding the news about the Nemesis online, should we continue to bribe the media to influence public opinion?" "No need. Also, tell those gangs down there to keep a low profile for a while. The threats they made to those shops can be withdrawn. We need to stay quiet for a few months." Kingpin, thinking about everything that had just happened, felt a lingering fear and continued, "Also, get me a plane right now. Before the plan begins, I need to go to Germany to recuperate for a while." "Boss, are you alright?" the manager asked, feigning concern as he looked at Kingpin's right arm. "I'm fine." Kingpin looked at his mangled right arm. "I remember Osborn's lab made a big breakthrough in limb regeneration experiments. Take some men there and bring those people over to work for us." "Yes. You can leave now. I need to rest for a while." Kingpin slowly closed his eyes, exhausted. Speaking for so long had taken a toll on his body. Late at night, in the laboratory supported by Osborn, Connors hesitated, looking at the medicine in his hand. Just moments ago, Osborn's management suddenly told him that human trials must begin as soon as possible, or they would fire him and conduct their own research. Because the core formula he obtained from Peter Parker had been shared with management upon achieving a breakthrough, if Osborn chose to fire him and go it alone, all his efforts over the past decade would be wasted. Connors looked at his half-severed right arm, struggling with his decision. Instead of using this half-finished drug on volunteers, should I use it on myself first? Just as he was about to make a decision, a loud commotion erupted outside the laboratory. A large group of tall, burly men, armed and masked, strode menacingly into the laboratory. After dealing with the security guards, they shattered the tempered glass door with a few shots and entered. "What do you want?" Connors gently placed the medicine on the table and glared at the men. Whatever you're up to, these are valuable experimental materials. I hope you'll be careful. You must be Dr. Connors, the masked leader said, comparing Connors' face to the photograph in his hand. Please come with us, and take the necessary research data and equipment with you. Where to? Connors pressed. The masked man replied, You don't need to worry about that. We'll pack your things. Everything except the essentials will be destroyed, so please don't forget any important data. Don't worry, we'll continue your research in a new place. With that, the masked leader waved his hand, and his henchmen immediately produced boxes of gasoline, which they then poured without hesitation throughout the laboratory. Some of his men also used baseball bats to smash empty test tubes on the table, clearly trying to force Connors to make a choice quickly. Stop it! Connors cried out in anguish, seeing his years of hard work being treated this way. Wait until I get some important things out, then I can go with you. Why didn't you say that earlier? You're being ungrateful, the masked leader sneered inwardly, then waved his hand to stop his men's violent actions, politely saying, Thank you very much for your cooperation. The next day, at school, John sat in the back row by the window, pretending to listen attentively to the lecture, but his mind was racing with thoughts of the previous night's events. He had received an emergency call about the fire in Osborne last night and rushed to the scene immediately, but due to the distance, by the time he arrived, it was all over. To be honest, he's improved, John smirked slightly. He knew exactly who was behind it all, Kingpin, whom he had almost killed. He suspected Kingpin because the guy had also learned to fish. In the half hour leading up to the Osborne fire, Kingpin used his men to commit crimes one by one, keeping them constantly away from the Osborne laboratory. By the time Kingpin received the news and arrived, more than 20 minutes had passed. Only that one-armed underworld emperor could have the means and purpose to manipulate the mob. What would happen if Kingpin were injected with a lizard serum? John pondered. Then, an image of an inflatable lizard popped into his mind. A fat lizard? A lizard pig? As he drifted into thought, class time gradually passed. As soon as get out of class ended, a pale arm draped over his shoulder. Without turning around, he knew it was Gwen Stacy. How did yesterday's combined interrogation of your parents go? John asked, turning back with a smile. Come home for dinner with me after school tonight, Gwen said weakly, slumped on the table. You really want me to go eat? Didn't you explain things clearly last night? John looked at the blonde girl in front of him strangely. You don't like me, do you? Ah. Gwen's head jerked up as she looked at the handsome boy in front of her, waving her hands frantically. How could that be? Don't think nonsense. I would never like you. We're just going to have dinner tonight. The girl's explanation gradually faded from John's ears as his attention began to focus on the scene before him. Watching the girl wave her hands frantically, John realized his X-ray vision seemed to have awakened. The reason he felt this way was because, from his perspective, the girl's clothes gradually blended into the air. Not only her clothes, but also the chair, her backpack, and the girl's other clothing were all seen through by John's gaze. At this moment, Gwen, in John's eyes, seemed to be wearing the Emperor's new clothes. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 28 Too Much Yang Energy. Don't overthink it. We can't just tell my parents our identities directly, so I had to lie and say we're dating. Come over for dinner tonight, just like before. Afterwards, we'll pretend we broke up amicably, and that'll be the end of it. In the classroom, Gwen excitedly explained, her eagerness attracting the attention of the other students. John, however, paid no attention to her explanation, staring blankly at the breathtaking view before him. As a flesh-based super-powered individual, Gwen's usually ordinary attire couldn't hide her stunning figure. Now, draped in new clothes, every movement was breathtaking in John's eyes. Her perfect waist-to-hip ratio, her healthy abs, and various other indescribable features gave John a strange sense of awe, far surpassing those so-called fitness models online. In that instant, he conjured images of vices, water pumps, and furnaces. When John came to his senses, the memory was already unforgettable. To break the awkward silence, he abruptly raised his right hand and slammed it over his eyes. Slap, what's wrong? Are you sick? Gwen looked at Kent, who suddenly covered his eyes in obvious discomfort and leaned on his desk, wondering why he was reacting so much more strongly than she was. The girl leaned closer and saw John clutching his stomach with his left hand, his right arm covering his eyes, and his cheeks flushed slightly. "Are you all right?" She patted John's shoulder, looking concerned. "I'm fine. I'll be there for dinner tonight. I need to calm down now, don't bother me." John rested his head on the desk, his voice completely calm and devoid of emotion. "Strange," Gwen muttered, starting to wonder why John was reacting so strongly. Could he like me? A possibility popped into Gwen's mind. Considering that she had just said she would pretend to be his girlfriend, and then he got so excited, the girl became more and more certain of her guess. My nemesis likes me, this thought entered her mind, leaving the girl somewhat bewildered and conflicted. What if he confesses to me? What if he takes advantage of dinner tonight, using his boyfriend status to try and grope me? I should definitely reject him firmly. Gwen was torn by an internal struggle. Soon after, the bell rang for class. But with her mind in turmoil, she couldn't concentrate on the lesson, spending the entire class thinking about how to politely reject John. Meanwhile, John, sitting in the front row, had learned to control his X-ray vision after a period of reflection. He only breathed a sigh of relief when he saw all his classmates dressed. As the bell rang, he prepared to go outside for some fresh air, but just as he stood up, Gwen, almost reflexively, said, "Sorry, you're a good person, we're not a good match. Are you talking to me?" John glanced at her in confusion, not understanding why she suddenly said something so disapproving. Realizing she had made a blunder, the girl could only lower her head awkwardly and remain silent. Leaving the classroom, he found a secluded corner and leaped onto the rooftop. Feeling the gentle breeze, John took a deep breath of the cool air. Gazing at the towering skyscrapers of New York City in the distance, he muttered to himself, "Has too much sun made me too yang? Should I find a way to release it?" John quietly enjoyed the cool breeze on the rooftop until just before class, then returned to the classroom. The day slowly passed as the teacher lectured. In the evening, as soon as the school bell rang, Gwen, her mind now calm, approached him and said, "Let's go together." John nodded, put his textbooks in his drawer, and followed Gwen out of the classroom, heading towards her house. On the way home, Gwen suddenly turned her back to him and said, "I'm telling you, tonight you absolutely mustn't show anything unusual in front of my father. Don't let him discover our identities." "Shouldn't I be the one reminding you of that?" John stared at the girl. "If you hadn't followed me, none of this would have happened." "Now, Cheng Wei, 2 web shooters," John said, extending his hand. Gwen was taken aback, not understanding John's intentions. "Compensation for lost wages? You know how many criminals slipped through my fingers while I was having dinner with you? You have to compensate me." John's outstretched right hand trembled. "You?" Gwen was somewhat exasperated, pointing at John, speechless. He'd come to her house for a free meal, yet he was demanding payment. But in the end, the girl angrily slapped the 2 round launchers into his hand. "Thanks, boss." John contentedly put the 2 launchers into his pocket, then said casually, "When we meet Chief George, I'm going to pretend we're dating, right? What are you planning?" Gwen's eyes sharpened. "To coordinate our statements. Your uncle is the police chief. If you don't prepare anything, you'll be exposed." John said. Oh, Gwen said, bewildered. "Then I'll say you pursued me first, and I only reluctantly agreed after your persistent pestering." John said slowly. "Why did I have to pursue you first?" Gwen immediately objected. "Why can't you be the one who falls for me first, and then I reluctantly agreed to date you?" Fine, then I'll reluctantly pursue you first." John waved his hand. "What do you mean, reluctantly?" Gwen gritted her teeth in anger, deciding that she would definitely dump John in front of her father after a while. Outside the laboratory funded by Osborn, Peter stared blankly at the ruins reduced to rubble by the fire. After a while, he recovered from his confusion and eagerly asked a nearby staff member, "Excuse me, how did the laboratory inside catch fire?" "It was fine yesterday. Last night, a group of masked men injured the security guards, then kidnapped Dr. Connors, and set fire to the laboratory, causing Osborn heavy losses," the staff member explained. "What about the Nemesis? Did the Nemesis come to rescue us last night?" Peter pressed. By the time the Nemesis arrived, the fire had been burning for quite a while, and no one knew where the person had gone. The staff member looked at the dazed Peter Parker, shook his head regretfully, and walked away. Chapter 29. You're going a bit too far. As dusk fell, the sky gradually darkened, the sun slowly setting, leaving behind a lingering glow. Streetlights gradually illuminated the way for pedestrians. Throughout their conversation, John and Gwen had successfully crafted a more convincing story of their past, making them seem like a genuine couple in love. Finally, they arrived at Gwen's door. The girl gently pressed the doorbell, then glared at John, saying, "Remember not to give yourself away again." John didn't reply. When the door opened, he presented her with flowers he had just bought from the florist, saying, "Hello, Auntie, I'm here again for dinner." Helen accepted the flowers with a gentle smile. "Come in, dinner's just finished." As soon as they entered the living room, they saw the prepared meal. Stacy's family was already seated, ready to eat, and all eyes turned to them. Gwen felt a surge of pressure, although she was pretending. In her family's eyes, it was like bringing her boyfriend home. Facing Gwen's family, John preemptively greeted them one by one. "Kent, are you my sister's boyfriend now?" Gwen's younger brother asked curiously, having met John before when he visited their home. "Yes, we're currently dating." "Looking forward to meeting you all," John replied with a hearty smile, clasping his hands together in a gesture of goodwill. He then considerately pulled out a chair for Gwen before taking his own seat. Having already made a good impression, the younger siblings didn't have much of an opinion about suddenly having a brother-in-law. "All right, stop talking so much, the food's getting cold," Helen urged, and John joined them for dinner. During the meal, the family chatted casually but didn't put too much pressure on John. However, Gwen knew the main event was yet to come, and her father remained silent throughout. Sure enough, towards the end of dinner, after observing John's behavior closely, George finally spoke. "Kent, when did you and Gwen officially become a couple?" As soon as George spoke, the others immediately fell silent, observing him intently. "Uncle, you can just call me John," Kent said with a shy smile. "Actually, we officially became a couple last week. I confessed to Gwen first, and she said yes." "Does your family know you're dating so early?" George asked. "Actually, my family passed away a few years ago, and I live alone now," John said calmly. "I'm sorry." George's previously aggressive attitude softened immediately, feeling like he'd already done this once before. "It's okay, it's been a long time, and I'm not really that sad," John shook his head. Because of the previous topic, to avoid hurting John again, George tried to ask less sensitive questions. After several rounds of questioning, he gradually came to accept John. Of course, you can only know a person's face, not their heart. At least, they needed to get to know each other better before he could truly accept her. As the eldest daughter in the family, Gwen was someone George had to be mindful of. "Next, I just need to find a time to tell Dad that Kent and I broke up," Gwen thought to herself. "Oh, right, here, this is for you. You said you wanted it last time, I forgot." George remembered something, took a piece of paper from his pocket, placed it on the table, and pushed it toward his youngest son. "This is..." John looked at the words on the paper, surprised. "The signature of the killer. My son asked me for it last time." George smiled. "Forget it, I don't want it." The child looked at the signature in front of him and shook his head. "Why?" Gwen asked first, trying to appease John's feelings. "Didn't you say you liked him a lot? But my classmates all say he's a bad guy, that he's broken the law, and that Dad will arrest him." The child slowly pushed the signature away. "Okay, if you don't like it, then forget it." George didn't show any attitude and silently put away the signature, but Gwen kept looking at John, worried that he was uncomfortable. George noticed his daughter's actions and looked at John, suddenly asking, "What do you think of the killer? Do you want this signature?" "No, Uncle, I don't have a very good impression of the killer." John slowly shook his head. "What do you mean? I thought you young people liked superheroes." George became curious about John's attitude towards Keith. "Why don't you like him? Is it because he broke the law?" "No, I just think he's not decisive enough." "Not decisive enough? If you were Keith, what would you do?" George started to pay attention. "If there were no other conditions, even if I were Keith, I wouldn't become a street superhero. Those gangsters would be handled by the police." John took a sip of soup and said, "Of course, if I had to be a superhero, I should just kill those serious criminals. Don't you think Keith's behavior is like Batman in DC Comics? He adheres to the so-called no-kill principle, but if he doesn't kill, Those criminals will definitely come out and cause trouble again. But that's illegal. George reminded him. Keith has broken the law now, Uncle. You even led a team to arrest him. Since it's a crime, why didn't he go all out? New York City would be a better place than it is now. I guess he's just too ruthless. John concluded, You're going a bit too far. George stared intently at the person explaining his ideas, and the others were also surprised by John's words. After dinner, the two walked out of the house, and Gwen said angrily, Why did you say that at the end? My dad's impression of you has obviously worsened. Don't you understand our initial purpose? John reminded her, Wasn't your initial purpose to find an excuse to break up with me in front of your parents, so as not to reveal your identity as Ghost Spider? Isn't that a perfect goal? Now that Chief George's impression of me has worsened, doesn't that mean he will interfere with our relationship? Then you can go with the flow, and we can successfully break up. And who would believe that someone whose ideals are completely opposite to crime breaker is crime breaker? But, Gwen was conflicted. Then what do you want to do? Continue playing the so-called couple game with you, and then one day, your father will find that when John Kent appears in front of him, crime breaker can't be found anywhere in New York. John said with a rationality that was somewhat cruel. Chapter 30 The Ancient One appears. Late at night, on a rooftop on Black Street in Queens, New York, Peter Parker stood in the cold wind, feeling utterly desolate. His family was poor, the girl he liked at school was in the arms of the school bully, and he had finally managed to develop a drug with the help of Dr. Connors, only to have the lab burned down and Connors kidnapped. Peter Parker looked at the half-finished reagent in his hand. He had planned to use his status as the second author to secure funding and complete his studies after the reagent's release, but now everything was ruined. Why don't I be the first volunteer? Peter Parker's hand trembled slightly as he held the reagent. He took a deep breath and aimed the syringe at the carotid artery. Before he could move, a hand reached out and snatched the reagent from his hand. Who is it? The Nemesis. Peter looked up and saw the Nemesis, a frequent television character, holding the reagent and staring at him. That's right, it's me. Instead of using this half-finished reagent, I'll give you a better opportunity, John said slowly. What is it? Peter Parker asked. The next day, in a classroom at Midtown High School, Gwen watched in surprise as Peter Parker announced his transfer. Why are you suddenly transferring? Gwen asked after Peter came down from the stage. A company has decided to hire me, and I've decided to go there for research, Peter Parker said with a smile. Which company? Why so suddenly? What about your studies? Gwen looked Peter up and down, noticing that the previously shy Peter Parker was now full of confidence. Peter shook his head mysteriously. I signed an agreement, so I can't reveal too much. Besides, have you forgotten I'm a genius? I finished high school a long time ago. Goodbye, Gwen. Let's keep in touch sometime, Peter said with a smile as he packed his things. John, hands behind his head, watched this scene, his eyes expressionless. It was still the familiar New York City, but more than 4 months had passed since Peter's transfer. In an alley, John kicked away a criminal at his feet and casually brought up a progress bar, 93.267%, 93.268%, almost there. John's expression was calm yet slightly numb as he stared at the progress bar. Months of effort had finally pushed the progress bar to over 90%. During this time, he had taken down all sorts of villains in New York City. Low-level villains like Bullseye and Tombstone were easily beaten into prison whenever they dared to show their faces. Tombstone alone had been in prison 3 times in the past few months. Later on, not only did John hire his own men to fight, but some gangs could even directly inform him of their opponents' crimes and locations through their underlings, allowing John to take care of them directly. A woman in her 40s, whom he had rescued, grabbed his hand gratefully, saying, "Thank you, my nemesis. If it weren't for you, I would have." She was on the verge of tears. John dismissively brushed her arm away, ignoring her, and silently walked away, mechanically heading towards his next destination. The woman stared in astonishment at the Kryptonian's retreating figure, feeling that he was somewhat different from the descriptions in the news reports. In mid-air, John flew towards his next destination. After months of exposure to the sun, he had fully developed his other Kryptonian abilities, such as flight, heat vision, and freezing breath. However, due to the low potential of his original genes, these skills didn't seem particularly powerful. Patrolling over New York, he suddenly noticed a robbery in the distance. Sizzle. Just as he was about to approach, a circle of golden sparks suddenly appeared in front of him. What is this? John was startled, his body twisting rapidly, suspending himself before the circle. Inside the circle was a completely different scene. A bald woman sat gracefully in a chair, skillfully brewing tea. Ancient One? What do you want with me? I haven't done anything too outrageous, have I? John stared through the halo at the other's bald head. Or is there something about my future that you think has crossed a line? John spoke bluntly to the bald man. Pretending to be knowledgeable in front of someone who could see countless timelines and different futures was no different from being a clown. The other person might know more than he did. Since the Ancient One had come to him before their official meeting, she must already know him well enough, maybe even what color underwear John would wear tomorrow. And wait a minute, I just remembered there's still a robber over there. John looked at the fleeing robber in the distance. The Ancient One waved her hand, and a halo suddenly appeared beneath the fleeing robber, engulfing him, leaving only a jade ornament in his place. Can we talk now? You stole my monster. John's eyes turned cold. If he weren't wary of the other's strength, he would have attacked already. Can I beat her now? With my current strength of over 200 tons, a sudden sneak attack should be enough to shatter her body. However, how to sneak attack a time manipulation user who can see the future without a plot-induced death is the problem. I think you should take a good rest, Superman, the Ancient One said to John with a tolerant smile. Reasons, John frowned. Don't give me that riddle. I don't have your perspective right now. Let's be blunt so everyone can accept it. Don't you feel your emotions are becoming increasingly cold? The Ancient One looked at John, whose expression was utterly indifferent. 5 months of relentless, uninterrupted fighting against evil has completely numbed your spirit. If this continues, your sense of good and evil will be completely reversed. If this continues, every time you fight evil, your brain will experience intense nausea, and then you'll turn around and embrace evil. The last time you slept was half a year ago, and the last time you ate was 4 months ago at your classmate's house. You'll become a slave to power, the Ancient One said. So what if I've become one? I'm fine now, John said nonchalantly. Once I have immortality and invincibility, I'll have plenty of time to slowly regain my lost emotions. But human society can't wait that long, the Ancient One said helplessly. In the future I see, when you lose your restraints, the entire human society will descend into slavery. John wasn't concerned about the idea of humanity entering slavery at this moment, but instead asked, loss of restraints? What do you mean? I can't see the system's trajectory in your future, the Ancient One said, her gaze becoming incredibly profound. Chapter 31 Future Crisis. At the beginning of every future, you become quite lost, and the system you speak of has never appeared in my future, the Ancient One explained. John asked the system in his mind, why is that? Why does the Ancient One say you've never appeared in the future? The system slowly explained, host, the Ancient One's time stone can only rewind to a limited number of universes at most. It cannot interfere with items at the multiverse level or higher, so every time the Ancient One observes the future, the John Kent she sees is from the present, but without me possessing him, John understood. The Ancient One's time stone wasn't high enough to challenge the system, so every future she saw only contained himself, and the system bound to him was not included. If he lost the system, his future self would only be an ordinary street hero with the original Superman cells. The sudden disappearance of his trump card for becoming a Buddha would be a devastating blow. Although John had considered breaking away from the system and becoming independent, it was his main source of strength during his childhood, so he couldn't accept it immediately. This also explains why the Ancient One said he would embrace the darkness. Since the system was gone, his motivation to do good deeds naturally disappeared. Frankly, he couldn't predict what would happen next. I believe you already know the whole story. I'm only here to advise you not to be too extreme. If you push things too far, fate will inevitably bring you closer sooner. The green gem on Ancient One's chest emitted a faint glow as she spoke gently. This guy saw the future again. John looked at the guy in front of him, utterly exasperated. Perhaps in those few short sentences, behind every word, this guy had rehearsed the future hundreds of times, making sure he wouldn't make a mistake. John looked at the confident Ancient One and thought, you like rehearsing, huh? Well then, watch closely. Ancient One's expression also changed slightly, because after Kent learned about his future, the future became very predictable. Rehearsal 1, Ancient One looked at John through the portal in front of her and said, so, What's your decision now? Fuck you. Die? Having just confirmed that the system in his mind wasn't responding and knowing he was merely a replay of the future, John suddenly cursed and charged forward without hesitation. Unleashing his full power, John charged into the portal with a deafening sonic boom, raising his fist to strike the Ancient One. But before he could even touch her, golden ropes bound his ankles, preventing him from moving forward. However, the powerful airflow from his punch still sent the Ancient One's frail body flying. Replay 2, the Ancient One, just recovering from the previous timeline, asked, "Why are you suddenly so irritable?" "Irritable my ass. Die?" Another roar erupted. Knowing his identity, John charged at the Ancient One without hesitation, raising his fist to strike, but this time the prepared Ancient One bound him. "Ancient One, aren't you going to explain?" The next moment, a blinding red light erupted from John's eyes, nearly severing the Ancient One's head. Rehearsal 3, the Ancient One preemptively bound John's hands and feet, forming a golden shield over his eyes to prevent the heat vision from erupting. But 2 spider silk threads shot out from John's wrists first, enveloping the Ancient One and pulling her body directly towards herself. Feeling the pull on the silk threads, John grinned maliciously. "Got you. Die?" Rehearsal 7, so can you tell me what's going on? The Ancient One looked at John in midair speechlessly. John, who was tightly bound, relaxed completely, his mind blank, neither responding nor struggling. After experiencing more than 700 rehearsals in a second, the Ancient One finally understood. When the future Kent knew that he was not the original, he would attack her without hesitation and with all his might, not wanting to reveal any information about his future to her. It can be said that when John knew that he was being rehearsed by the future and could clearly distinguish whether he was the original, he had already begun to resist this future rehearsal. Seeing the slight change in the Ancient One's expression, John knew that his decision had worked. Although I don't know what I'll be like in the future, if my thoughts are coherent, I should be willing to die for myself. In that case, knowing I'm not myself, my attack methods should be completely different from the plans I have prepared in reality. That way, if this guy really relies too much on his future perspective and thinks he knows all my attack methods, then I can give him a good surprise, John thought to himself. Alright, I don't want to keep testing you. Tell me your real purpose in coming to me. In reality, John went straight to the point. I don't think I have the strength to fight you now. Since my future is in your way, why don't you just kill me now? Don't try to fob me off with some nonsense about God's benevolence. He crossed his arms, a hint of mockery in his eyes. You definitely have something you want from me, right? And it's something only my future self can do. You guessed right. After staring at him intently for a few seconds, the Ancient One sighed. 3 months from now, the entire world will undergo a dramatic change, and the situation after that will be beyond my control. So I want you to save the world. You want me to save the world? John asked with amusement. You want a madman who predicts a future where humanity will be thrown back in time to save the world? Are you crazy or am I crazy? That's like asking Hitler to protect the Jews. That's too absurd, John scoffed. Knowing that the person opposite him understood his nature, he made no attempt to conceal anything during his conversation with the Ancient One. That's still better than the entire universe being destroyed, the Ancient One said calmly. Destroy the universe? John noticed this phrase, wondering if he had misheard. Would the future plot really go that far after he joined this universe? According to the story, Thanos only wiped out half of humanity in the universe. Was this some kind of villain from another universe interfering? Destroying the universe is just a relatively better outcome among all the bad endings, the Ancient One sighed softly. According to her calculations, even if the future Kent were willing to intervene, the chances of the universe surviving were extremely slim. The greater probability was that Kent, facing various crises, would simply abandon the universe without hesitation, refusing to fight a losing battle. Chapter 32 Undercurrents. In the air above New York City, John returned from the Ancient One's visit, deep in thought. He then asked the system, do you have any clues about the changes the Ancient One mentioned about happening 3 months from now? Host, the changes the Ancient One mentioned might be related to us. John's flight faltered. We? You mean the future disaster was caused by us? Then why didn't the Ancient One just kill me outright? Host, I mean the future disaster might be caused by beings like us from another world. Have you considered how we came to this world? Transmigration? And have you considered why you're so special? Able to traverse universes? What do you mean? Are you implying there's a hidden story behind my transmigration? John asked suspiciously. Don't tell me it's some powerful conspiracy or something, or you'll try to possess me again. It's not as complicated as you think. It's just that this universe is gradually becoming a garbage dump, the system said. A garbage dump? You mean we were thrown into this universe as garbage? John was astonished. You can understand it this way, more and more trash will accumulate in this universe, and over time, the quality of the trash will also increase, the system explained. At first, it's just messless memory and information like us. As time goes on, the mass of trash that can be discarded will increase. After a few months, it will be large enough to accommodate normal humans. After a year, a spatial portal might even appear to lead to our universe. A portal? John asked. What are those worlds that discard trash like? Host, the universe is infinite. Any form of object or creature can be discarded into this universe. It's not man-made, it's just a spectacle in the multiverse. However, the higher the compatibility of a creature with this world, the more likely it is to be brought to this world. For example, characters in novels, anime, and games who have similar experiences. So, one day I can directly see a real-life Jerusalem appear in Marvel and fight zombies? John was dumbfounded. No wonder the Ancient One said she couldn't handle it either. Wasn't that a given? With characters from various games, novels, and anime running in, let alone the Ancient One, even the entire Marvel universe together couldn't handle it. System, how about we run away? Once I'm strong enough, we can just move to another world, John suggested. He was currently only possessed by the strongest superhuman system. Let alone Superman, even God, the highest-ranking force in DC, would be easily slapped by other characters who specialize in mere stacking of boxes or melodramatic phrases. Please consider this carefully, host. This system does not provide any constructive advice and will not interfere with your growth in any way, the system calmly stated. Hiss. John inhaled sharply in midair, deciding to be more grounded. He hadn't even left his planet yet, and thinking about moving to another universe was a bit too ambitious. For now, I should focus on awakening my Iron Man version of myself as quickly as possible. John's gaze briefly fell on the nearly full progress bar, then he quickly sped across the skies above New York City. As for the Ancient One's suggestion to rest, he completely ignored it. With even greater pressure than before, John would only push himself harder than ever. In a beautifully landscaped courtyard in Germany, the lawn was covered with lush green grass and various flowers. In the center of the courtyard stood a stone pavilion. Kingpin's right arm was missing, and he silently observed the scenery. After more than 4 months of recovery, he had almost fully recovered, but as time passed, the anger within him grew stronger. The memory of his nemesis and the various humiliations inflicted upon him made it impossible for him to remain calm. At this moment, a man entered from outside, bowed deeply, and presented a green reagent with both hands, respectfully saying, "Boss, the perfect reagent in the laboratory has been successfully prepared, successfully removing the externally mutated parts." Very good. A glint of fervor flashed in Kingpin's eyes as he grabbed the reagent, staring intently at the emerald green liquid within. If there are no problems, then mass-produce them for the men first. I remember Ivan has already successfully mass-produced the Iron Man armor, right? Kingpin's lips curled into a sinister smile. With a massive army of superhumans and Iron Man armor, from now on I'll be more than just the Emperor of the Underworld, the entire world will be under my rule. Now, let's announce our existence to the world with the death of the Nemesis. Immediately prepare several passenger planes back to New York. I can't wait to see that bastard's ugly face. Yes, boss. Kingpin's subordinate lowered his head even further, his tone respectful. But before that, I need to test the effects of this drug. Without hesitation, Kingpin plunged the reagent into a vein in his neck, slowly injecting the emerald green liquid, and then waited quietly for the effects to take hold. 2 minutes later, Kingpin felt an itch at the side of his right shoulder amputation, followed by a surge of power spreading throughout his body, but accompanied by a deep, bone-chilling pain. Roar. A furious roar erupted from Kingpin's mouth, the sonic waves almost visible to the naked eye, sending large patches of flowers and grass flying in the courtyard. In North America, somewhere in a densely vegetated tropical rainforest, a bearded, shirtless man, pulling up his loose trousers, flagged down a passing van in the rainforest, asking somewhat awkwardly, "Hello, where is this?" "Guatemala. Why are you naked?" the elderly driver asked, puzzled. The man stammered, finding it difficult to speak. The old man looked at the kind-faced man and said kindly, "Get in the car first, there's a town ahead, I'll take you there to change your clothes." Thank you very much." The man thanked him repeatedly, then got into the car to avoid the rain, and the old man thoughtfully draped a cloth over the man's upper body. "Where are you going next?" the old man asked casually while driving. "New York, to see a former colleague," the disheveled man explained. A day later, several planes with different purposes simultaneously flew from different locations to New York. Meanwhile, John was 93.272% complete of the next stage. Chapter 33 Hatred? Above New York City, John looked down at the peaceful scene below, his brow furrowed. "Damn it, I've almost exhausted all the criminals in New York City. Now they're all fleeing to other cities." His gaze drifted into the distance, finally settling on a decision. "Looks like I need to expand into other cities." Boom. With a clear sonic boom, John's figure disappeared from the skies above New York City, heading towards the nearest city. Within an hour, John had traversed the New York metropolitan area, arriving at this undeveloped wasteland. Looking down at the city from his vantage point, John was pleasantly surprised to find that this new server was indeed different. There were already 5 or 6 visible experienced monsters right after the server opened. That afternoon, in a classroom at Midtown High School, a teacher entered, his gaze sweeping casually, but he noticed that one desk in the corner was empty, with no one there. "Where's our Superman classmate?" "He's not here today," the teacher asked, somewhat puzzled. John Kent had earned that nickname in the class because of his surname. Gwen stood up and said, "Teacher, Kent twisted his ankle and is in the hospital. He's taking a week off. He said he'll submit the leave slip and medical certificate later." After class, her classmate and friend Jenny teased, "Kent's taking leave? Why are you the one telling the teacher? You guys wouldn't, Jenny raised an eyebrow knowingly, the meaning obvious. Gwen thought helplessly, "I knew it." "What are you thinking?" "It's just that I happened to be there when he twisted his ankle, and I even called the ambulance for him," Gwen explained calmly, inwardly apologizing to her friends for the lie she'd made up. "But have you heard? According to the latest news, the Nemesis isn't in New York City today, he's gone to Buffalo next door," a well-informed student said. "Huh?" Gwen was immediately surprised. John hadn't mentioned going on a business trip to the next city when he called her. He'd simply said, "Get me a week off, make up the reason yourself," and hung up. "Do you think he'll just stop working in New York City?" "I was hoping to get his autograph sometime," a female student said regretfully, covering her face. Hearing her classmates sigh, Gwen thought to herself, "If I could keep my identity secret, I could get it for you directly." "What did you say? The Nemesis isn't in New York City?" On the plane to New York City, Kingpin stared in astonishment at his subordinate's report. "Yes, boss. According to the latest news, the Nemesis is currently in Buffalo, the next city." Feeling tricked, Kingpin angrily crushed a cup in his hand, sending sharp shards of glass flying everywhere. He stood up angrily and said, "Notify Tombstone that as soon as I get off the plane, immediately use the Iron Man suit to head to New York City." Several hours later, in the pitch-black night, in a university laboratory near Broadway, Banner collapsed wearily into a chair after receiving the neutralizing agent. Immediately, a large group of heavily armed soldiers in uniform rushed in and pinned him to the ground. The young soldier at the head of the group, watching Banner being obediently led out of the lab, pointed his gun at the professor standing nearby with his hands raised and asked, "Who are you? What did you do for him? Why is he so quiet today?" Samuel Stern, with a gun pointed at him, hurriedly explained, "I'm a professor at this university. I just helped him eliminate. Perhaps I only suppressed the power within him." Emil, upon hearing this, angrily pulled the man up, saying, "You suppressed the thing. Don't you understand? You've ruined the military's plans." Looking at the officer's superhuman strength, a hint of surprise flashed in Samuel Stern's eyes. "You also possess this superhuman power, though weak, but it's undeniable. If you listen to me, you can replicate Professor Banner's success." Emil's movement slowed, his eyes filled with doubt and uncertainty. "You say you have a way to give me that power too?" "That's right. If you're willing, I can replicate his success again," Dr. Stern said impatiently. Emil's heart raced, and he looked at Stern again, asking for confirmation. "Are you sure you can do it?" Stared at like that, and thinking of his research results, Stern's excitement intensified. "No problem, I guarantee you'll gain immense power. Alright, let's start the experiment right now, Emil said urgently. Sir, this isn't in accordance with regulations. We can discuss everything back at the station. A soldier who had stayed behind tried to offer a warning, but Emil knocked him unconscious with a single punch. Understanding the soldier's resolve, Stern nodded. I'll arrange the experiment immediately, but could I ask what kind of biological agent you injected? I don't know. I only know it was a research sample provided by a high school student introduced through Stark Industries. It was originally from Osborne Industries, Emil mumbled. Before dawn, a furious roar echoed from Broadway throughout New York City. Kingpin, who had just disembarked from the plane, looked in the direction of the sound with a puzzled expression. What happened there? Then he shook his head indifferently and said, never mind, I'm going to kill the nemesis first. He glanced at Tombstone, who was covered in bandages, and casually pulled a vial from his pocket and tossed it to him, saying, after using it, immediately put on your Iron Man suit and come with us to Buffalo next door. I want to give the nemesis a little surprise. Yes, boss. Tombstone injected the vial into his body without hesitation. Half an hour later, 2 planes landed in front of Kingpin, and as the cabin doors opened, more than 100 men with bulging muscles disembarked one after another. Now, put on your Iron Man suits and come with me to Buffalo. Looking at the cyborg army before him, Kingpin finally couldn't contain his rage and declared, I'm going to beat these nemesis to pulp. Meanwhile, far away in Buffalo, John pulled his phone out of his pocket, puzzled, and answered, calling at this hour, Gwen? Something's happened in New York? A brown monster covered in scales has suddenly appeared on Broadway and is wreaking havoc. I might not be able to handle it. A brown monster? Covered in scales? John was somewhat stunned, but glancing at his progress bar in the 90s, he replied without hesitation, I'm coming back right now. Chapter 34 Rewriting the Future. 10 minutes earlier, at a university near Broadway in New York City, a massive figure leaped from the dilapidated laboratory with a deafening roar, then crashed into the university parking lot with a deafening thud. The violent tremor startled the soldiers who hadn't yet prepared to evacuate. What was that? Was that the big green guy from before? Didn't we take it with us? I think I just saw a brown guy, but he was even bigger than the previous behemoth. Various guesses flooded the soldiers' minds. Before they could issue any new orders, they saw the grotesque body protruding from the rooftop. What is that? The lead soldier rubbed his eyes, doubting his own vision. Before him stood a gigantic monster, 5 meters tall, covered in brown scales and white bone spurs. Its skin was a disgusting, yellowish-brown, covered in putrid spots, like rotting flesh more than a day after death. A 4 to 5 meter long tail, its tip studded with bone spurs, extended from the tailbone. Its deep-set eyes held a bloodthirsty killing intent, inspiring fear in anyone who saw it. Seemingly annoyed by the soldiers' screams, the monster's eyes flashed with impatience. It casually pulled aside a nearby car and slammed it down. Bang! A deafening roar rang in the stunned soldier's ears. He turned his head blankly. His companion, who had been standing alive beside him, was gone. In his place lay a deep trench extending from where his companion had been. It was a trench carved by the wreckage of the car, starting beside him and stretching back for over 10 meters. At the end of the trench, one could see the mangled metal frame and charred remains of flesh. Before he could even fully process what was happening, the monster had already targeted him, leaping lightly through the air and slamming down upon him. No! The soldier's cry was cut short. Abomination casually tore the soldier in front of him in two, his crimson eyes sweeping over the others. The next moment, a horrific massacre unfolded among the soldiers. Faced with Abomination's overwhelming power, their eyes couldn't even keep up with his rapid movements. Every second, a dozen soldiers were killed by Abomination, their screams echoing throughout the university, only to fall silent again in less than 30 seconds. Tossing the last soldier's mangled body aside, Abomination's gaze swept over the towering buildings lining Broadway. Now, all he wanted was destruction. Meanwhile, in New York City, hundreds of Iron Man suits were making their presence felt in the air. The tail fins from their thrusters made them clearly visible to the crowd below. "Mommy, it's Iron Man," a little girl exclaimed, pointing to the migrating army of Iron Man suits in the sky. The girl's mother looked up, a flicker of confusion crossing her eyes at the hundreds of Iron Man suits in the sky. How could Iron Man have so many suits? Above, basking in the gaze of the crowd, Kingpin, clad in his custom-made super-large armor, suggested, How about we give New York City a little surprise? The next moment, amidst wild laughter, rows of miniature missiles were launched downwards by Kingpin. In a towering inferno, the entire city of New York was prematurely awakened, and Kingpin led his men towards their destination. Gwen, just awakened from her slumber and having learned of the incident through the police radio, rushed to the scene, only to stare in disbelief at the streets reduced to ruins. The once bustling Broadway was now a scene of carnage, with destroyed buildings everywhere, and the cries and screams of the crowd filling the air. Roar! A deafening roar echoed from afar. Gwen turned her head and saw a monster over 5 meters tall frantically destroying buildings. Every punch could topple a structure, every kick could make the earth tremble. Around the monster, countless armed helicopters and tanks were unleashing a hail of ammunition. Even individual rocket launchers were useless against it, let alone harming it. They couldn't even stop its advance, and were frequently destroyed by the enraged monster. What on earth is that thing? Gwen stared at the abomination in the distance, its destructive power alone enough to tell her she couldn't possibly defeat it. Just being wary of military bullets and missiles was already a problem. With that in mind, she didn't hesitate to call John. After briefly explaining what had happened, she turned and ran towards the ruins. Since she couldn't deal with the monster, she'd do what she could, like rescuing more people trapped in the rubble. Too slow, too slow. Outside Buffalo, John was speeding towards New York. But at his current supersonic speed, it would take at least another half hour to arrive, by which time it would be too late. There must be a better way. Think carefully. John pondered as he flew, and a possibility popped into his head. Without hesitation, she changed direction and flew towards the Himalayas. In Kamartaj, the Ancient One, holding the Eye of Agamotto, habitually used her ability to predict the future a few more times. A day after the rehearsal, accompanied by a loud bang, a man in black robes burst through the clouds and landed directly in front of her. We meet again. No, who knows how many times you've rehearsed this. The black-robed man, or rather, John in the rehearsal, ignored the wary gazes of the surrounding disciples and walked directly towards the Ancient One. All right, I know I'm your rehearsal. Now, hurry up, my real body needs to go to Broadway in New York, so hurry back to reality and give my real body a ride. John said, unceremoniously sitting down opposite the Ancient One, pouring himself a cup of tea, and taking a sip. In reality, the Ancient One's consciousness returned. She shook her head helplessly, and casually made a gesture. John, rushing towards the Himalayas at full speed, hadn't even run a few minutes when he saw a circle of light with dazzling sparks appear before him. Overjoyed, he rushed into it without the slightest hesitation. On the attack helicopter, General Ross surveyed the ruined city below with a grim expression. He knew his military career was over. This is the consequence of your relentless pursuit of power, Banner sneered. Can you become that monster again? Ross turned to Banner. How can you be sure I won't turn into the monster and wreak havoc on New York with that guy down there? Banner said, then he was astonished to see a dazzling golden halo slowly expanding outside the helicopter. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 35 Under the Spotlight. What is that? On the plane, General Ross also noticed the expanding halo outside the aircraft. The next moment, a dark figure swiftly emerged from the halo, speeding through the air for over 10 meters before hovering steadily. A nemesis. Ross's eyes narrowed slightly as he stared at the hovering figure not far away. Banner, who had long been staying in remote areas, asked, "Do you know who he is?" "My next test subject," as originally planned. Ross didn't answer, but silently thought to himself. In the past 6 months that John had been in New York, various forces had already noticed the extraordinary abilities of this new hero. Flight. Heat vision. Super strength. Super speed. Never tiring. Magical field. The combination of these abilities perfectly matched the power of Superman in DC Comics. And according to the investigation, his real identity just a few months ago was that of an ordinary wealthy student. Everyone was curious about how this little Superman had acquired such power overnight, but because of the constraints imposed by various forces, no one had taken the lead. It can only be said that John's current strength is in a rather awkward position. He's strong, but not incredibly strong. He's not strong enough to directly disregard high-yield nuclear bombs, and he's still within the range that humans can handle. Perhaps this is an opportunity. Ross looked down at the abomination wreaking havoc below. If he's lucky, he might be able to advance 1 or 2 levels. In the air, John's figure slowly floated up, his gaze fixed on the yellowish-brown monster with a huge tail. Why does the abomination look like this? He wondered, and with a swoop, he charged straight at the abomination. In the ruins, the abomination wreaked havoc, its 5-meter-tall body launching like a cannonball with a powerful push of its feet. With a series of crashes, 5 or 6 buildings were instantly smashed through by the abomination's body, then collapsed like dominoes. Roar! Looking at its masterpiece behind it, abomination roared to the sky in a fit of rage, but when it looked up, it saw a fist gradually enlarging in front of its eyes. What is this? Before it could even think, the fist was slamming into its right eye at a speed exceeding sound. The moment of contact, the first pain it had felt since entering this state exploded in its eye. Then, centered on it, the ground within a 10-meter radius seemed to explode like tofu in an instant, the terrifying force burying its entire body completely underground. John withdrew his fist, looking at the collapsed ground, his brow furrowing slightly. Not dead? Looks like a bit troublesome. His clothes below his right shoulder were completely torn open, and in his ears, Abomination's heartbeat showed no sign of weakening due to his attack, but instead grew even stronger. John's X-ray vision clearly showed that the cracked bones around Abomination's eye socket were healing at a visible speed, completely restored in just one breath. Healing abilities are the most troublesome thing. John sighed softly. Finally here, so is it over. In the distance, Gwen, who was rescuing civilians, breathed a sigh of relief upon seeing John appear, as if she had found her pillar of support. So I'm late again. In mid-air, Tony Stark, piloting his suit, looked speechlessly at the nemesis standing in front of the giant crater, and I remember he was in the next city. How come he got here faster than me? On the helicarrier. Nick Fury, watching the satellite footage, suggested, I think after this incident is over, we can invite him to join the Avengers directly. What do you think? I'm not sure if he will join. After all, compared to him, our strength is like children playing house. Hawkeye, who was also watching the video, waved his hand helplessly, and Natasha nodded in agreement. Wait, what's this guy doing? Nick Fury's eyes widened slightly. Is he no longer going to hide his identity? The scene showed him casually removing his mask and tossing it aside, revealing a handsome face. He then ripped off his black robe, revealing a muscular upper body. He twisted his neck, jumped lightly a couple of times, and then gently moved his right shoulder, as if warming up for an upcoming battle. We're doomed. Gwen covered her eyes, feeling utterly hopeless about her future. With the appearance of Abomination, the entire city of New York had received the news, and there were indeed some fearless reporters nearby, having been offered a hefty sum by their editor, live streaming the entire scene. Needless to say, John's appearance was now completely exposed, and within half a minute, no, 5 minutes, the entire city of New York would know his true identity. My idea of hiding my identity is completely shattered. What is this guy trying to do? Gwen roared inwardly. Tony Stark didn't seem to care much, simply commenting, not bad physique, barely matching my younger self. And Jarvis, don't call me out on that. As John stretched, a hand the size of a sandbag emerged from the crater in front of him, followed by a head, body, and feet. Abomination sprang to its feet, searching for the person who had injured it. But it saw that its supposed enemy was just an ordinary human less than half its height, and wondered if it was seeing things. Stopping weaklings is boring. Let me be your worthy opponent, John said with a smile, slowly walking towards it. Arrogant human, I'll tear you apart. Remembering the excruciating pain in its eye socket, Abomination's eyes flashed with rage, and it strode forward like a massive war fortress, charging towards John. Finally, with both feet moving in opposite directions, they stopped a little over 2 meters apart, and the air seemed to freeze, making the onlookers gasp for breath. Everyone stared wide-eyed, anticipating the battle between the two. In this eerie atmosphere, every second seemed to stretch endlessly. Fortunately, this calm didn't last long. In an instant, accompanied by a thunderous roar that echoed in everyone's ears, the figures of the man and the monster vanished from everyone's sight. In front of the surrounding reporters' cameras, after their after-images, only a 5-meter-wide crater remained, along with a series of thunderous roars that gradually lengthened. What happened? In the live broadcast room, Everyone stared blankly at the crater before them. Only Gwen and Stark, who had a panoramic view from high above, could barely keep up with the speed of the two. Chapter 36 Hectares, Humans. Just you wait. How fast is the speed of sound? On Earth, it travels at approximately 340 meters per second. 100 meters takes an average human 9 seconds to cover, while sound travels back and forth 3 times in just 1 second. But today, two beings with a strength of 1,000 tons of leg strength, using only their legs, propelled the Earth at a terrifying speed exceeding the limits of sound. From the very beginning of the battle, their speed far exceeded the limits of what the naked eye could perceive. To the average person, it seemed as if some unseen, mysterious force was smashing a crater 4 or 5 meters wide into the ground with a deafening roar. What these people didn't know was that those massive craters, resembling divine punishment, were merely the aftershocks of a casual punch from Jon and Abomination. And the two of them were unleashing attacks like this hundreds of times per second on their opponent. Boom 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 boom. A series of thunderous roars echoed through Parkway Street, followed by a chain of buildings collapsing like dominoes, turning into a sky full of ruins. High in the sky, Tony Stark piloted his armor, watching in awe as the ruins below sped erratically at hundreds of meters per second, disappearing into the distance. On average, more than a dozen buildings were destroyed every second. From Jon and Abomination's perspective, everything around them seemed frozen in time, the air acting like ropes binding their movements. Every step felt like being encased in steel. Air resistance became their greatest obstacle in their battle. In the eyes of these two inhuman monsters, only each other existed, nothing could stop their punches. During the fight, houses, vehicles, even humans, everything was reduced to fragments in the aftershocks of their clashes. Is this even human? Natasha stared blankly at the satellite imagery below. The once orderly New York City resembled a beautiful woman's face ripped open with a bloody wound, inspiring fear. When did you start having the illusion that these two are human? Hawkeye quipped from the side. Back in the battle, Jon was completely overwhelmed by Abomination. In terms of strength, Abomination was more than twice his size, and each punch landed on him, causing a slight sting to his skin. This indicated that Abomination's power had already penetrated his physical body and biofield defenses. His attacks could also injure Abomination, but the opponent's extraordinary healing ability allowed the wounds to heal instantly, leaving him completely unharmed. In the blink of an eye, the battle had spread for over 10 kilometers, with neither side able to gain the upper hand. No, I can't kill him. Jon thought anxiously. If this dragged on, without help, he might die in 4 or 5 hours from the accumulated wounds. Of course, that was the only possibility. In another hour or two, the sun would rise, and with the sunlight, his healing ability would be in no way inferior to Abomination's. His opponent, however, was clearly within the biofield, and healing required energy. Perhaps Jon could wear him down after another 10 or so hours. But that would introduce too many variables. Who knew what unexpected things might happen? Therefore, it was best to end the battle within an hour. Since I can't kill you for now, I'll just banish you. A thought flashed through Jon's mind as his brain raced, and the next moment he changed his battle strategy, soaring into the sky. HMPH. Trying to escape. Abomination sneered, watching Jon soar into the air. Without hesitation, it stomped its feet on the ground, creating a huge crater, instantly closing the distance with Jon. Then, it threw a simple punch, which Jon easily dodged. Seeing its punch miss, Abomination was slightly taken aback. This was the first time its opponent had dodged its attack in battle. This discovery immediately excited it, thinking its opponent had escaped, and this was another victory for it. But the next second, it saw Jon's dodged figure glide through the air in an arc before immediately turning back. It circled behind it, grabbing the bone spikes on its back from below, propelling itself further into the sky. Have you seen JoJo's Bizarre Adventure? Jon asked casually. However, because its ascent exceeded the speed of sound, his voice dissipated in mid-air before reaching Abomination. Damn it, what's this guy trying to do? Feeling the increasingly thin air thousands of meters above the ground, Abomination panicked. Its 4 or 5 meter long tail lashed out at Jon behind it, but Jon simply pulled it upwards. Abomination turned to strike Jon, but Jon coldly parried with a raised fist, and the force of the impact propelled it upwards even faster. Jon only paused slightly, then, relying on his flight ability, continued his upward surge, repeatedly pushing Abomination's body towards outer space. He's changed course, heading towards outer space, said the SHIELD data analysis expert. At this speed, he'll reach outer space within 10 minutes. Trying to throw that monster into space? That's certainly a good idea. Since he can't fly, he'll just become a pile of space junk in the weightless, matter-free outer space, Natasha commented. Nick Fury lowered his head, considering whether to send a rocket up to retrieve Abomination's body in outer space, but his expression changed drastically the next moment. He angrily questioned into the headset, "Who gave you that order? Do you know this is overstepping your authority? Withdraw the thing immediately." Nick Fury practically roared, and those around him had never seen their superior so furious. "Director, what happened?" Coulson asked, looking at Nick Fury's face, which was as black as the bottom of a pot. Nick Fury coldly replied, "General Ross, 2 intercontinental ballistic missiles were just launched, targeting the Nemesis." "What?" The entire conference room of the helicarrier was silent for a moment, then filled with a deafening roar. "Host, energy is fully charged." High in the sky, John, who was continuously hurling abominations upwards, suddenly received a system notification in his mind. "What? The battle isn't even over yet, how come the energy is already full?" John wondered. "It's okay, I'll upgrade immediately after I finish this guy, don't rush me." But John, continuing to hurl abomination towards the sky, turned his head and saw 2 supersonic, cylindrical projectiles hurtling towards him in the distance. "Damn it!" John exclaimed, without hesitation, kicking abomination hard in the lower back, sending it hurtling towards the missiles. His figure then flew backward rapidly. In his final moments, John understood his predicament. A terrifying killing intent erupted from him, finally transforming into a cold, self-deprecating laugh. "Ha, humans. Just you wait." The next instant, a massive burst of light and heat erupted, quickly engulfing the 2 figures. "Please recommend. Please vote, please, please, please. This is really important to me." Finally, one more thing, otherwise you'll think the title is Homelander. It's not clickbait, it just needed a little, referring to Chapter 30-odd, set up, crying. Chapter 37 The Death of Superman. In the cold, boundless outer space, a body covered in frost floated silently in the darkness. Below the body lay a magnificent planet. From an ordinary person's perspective, this floating body should be considered dead, for it had no heartbeat. Its body temperature was gradually merging with the surrounding temperature, and even a trace of brainwaves was absent. Its once smooth, jade-like skin was now charred, like a dried corpse roasted by fire. But within the body's brain, a cold, emotionless voice echoed in John's mind, "System energy bar full. Directly modify the body." Given that the host has lost vital signs and is incapable of action, the default selection for this modification is yes. Total modification time: 3 hours, 27 minutes, and 56 seconds. The next moment, a pale golden light began to emanate from all over the body, making it appear as if it had transformed into a small golden statue. Not far from this body in outer space, a fist-sized, jet-black meteorite was falling towards Earth. But just before being captured by Earth's gravity, the meteorite's dark surface struck the glowing body of the golden statue. Then, as if possessed by a sticky, soft substance, the meteorite clung to the statue's frozen surface. Upon contact, countless tiny black tentacles appeared on the meteorite, spreading out densely and gradually enveloping the statue's shimmering body. After this, the spread-out meteorite fragments returned to their inanimate state, lying dormant near the body. An hour later, behind the azure planet beside the statue, a blinding sun gradually emerged. The warm, gentle sunlight penetrated a thin barrier of the meteorite without hindrance, shining upon the statue and causing a crack, like a butterfly emerging from its cocoon, to appear on its charred skin. Now, let's turn our attention back to the ground. Nick Fury stared at the enormous fireball displayed on the satellite, his face ashen. But he finally sighed and said, "That's settled then. Immediately send people to search for the Nemesis and that, let's call it Abomination, and collect their bodies. The most urgent matter now is how to suppress the death of the Nemesis." Nick Fury sighed deeply, utterly helpless with Ross's dinner. "Director, the true identity of the Nemesis has completely spread online," Coulson said helplessly, holding a computer. "I believe they'll be extremely curious about the outcome of the battle. I'll go ask them how they're going to deal with it." Nick Fury adjusted his blindfold helplessly, but the next moment, a flash of red light erupted across the entire helicarrier. "Director, Our carrier's security system has been completely hacked. The computer technician said nervously. Just now, all the electronic data that wasn't backed up and destroyed today was stolen. What? The already exhausted Nick Fury sighed deeply again. Call Tony Stark immediately and tell him not to upload it to the network. It's over. A voice suppressing anger came from the carrier's broadcast system. I don't care what compromises or trade-offs you made. Although that guy was arrogant, he saved my life. And that damn general actually killed him. I will let everyone know this fact. Tony said indignantly, unable to accept that John died for such a ridiculous reason. Early morning, New York City, Broadway. After John and Abomination left in the fight, the police carried out the cleanup work. That's astonishing, an older police officer remarked, looking at the ruins around him. I never imagined human destructive power could reach this level. How dare you assume he's human, another officer scoffed. Who knows how that student did it? I heard online that he goes to school during the day and works as a vigilante at night. Doesn't he get tired? Who knows? But he's famous now. I heard a lot of people go to his old school to take pictures with him. And he's pretty good looking, isn't he? My daughter wasn't too fond of the killer, but just now she asked me to get his autograph. The older officer sighed, but the next moment his phone started vibrating incessantly. He answered his phone with a puzzled look. His daughter's anxious voice came through. Dad, Iron Man's Twitter just said that the kleptomaniac was killed by the general. Is that true? Ah. The old officer was taken aback, then pulled out his phone and saw that the top trending topic on Twitter was kleptomaniac's death, a government conspiracy. This is serious, the officer beside him muttered. Somewhere in the ruins, George, who had just learned the kleptomaniac's true identity, looked at his daughter and asked seriously, did you know that Kent is the kleptomaniac? Gwen, now dressed normally, lowered her head, gently fidgeting with the hem of her clothes, and whispered, I know. So, what you said about breaking up with him was also a lie. It wasn't a lie, Gwen whispered, my boyfriend's identity was fake. As she spoke, Gwen's phone in her pocket vibrated wildly. She knew without a doubt that it was her classmates, teachers, and friends relentlessly criticizing her. You know his identity, yet you kept it from us. Just how many secrets do you have? Hiss. George spoke, then suddenly seemed to remember something, rubbing his chin and looking Gwen up and down. You wouldn't happen to be Ghost Spider, would you? George blurted out the words that made Gwen most uneasy. Oh no, it's all John's fault. Gwen's brain was screaming wildly, but outwardly she could only nod helplessly. George could only slap his forehead in exasperation, while mentally cursing John. What did he mean by Ghost Spider being an orphan while he was still alive and well? Damn John, father and daughter thought to themselves at the same time, but the next moment they saw a police officer running towards them, panting. Chief. Chief, the officer said, supporting his knees, slightly out of breath. What? George was already annoyed and said angrily. Kerberos is dead, the officer said cautiously, knowing that his chief had been in contact with Kerberos and was afraid that the other person would be too heartbroken. Sure enough, the next moment, a tremendous roar erupted almost simultaneously from the mouths of the father and daughter. What? Chapter 38 Resurrection and Venom. George wanted to ask more questions, but Gwen had already grabbed the officer by the collar and blurted out, You said John is it? Oh. The officer, who had been lifted into the air, was surprised by the girl's strength, thinking to himself that she was indeed the chief's daughter, naturally strong. But he still replied, it was issued by Iron Man himself, saying that it was an order from General Ross, who created that monster. You can verify it online. How could this be? It shouldn't be. Gwen put the officer down, somewhat distraught, and subconsciously apologized before rushing to a corner to pull out her phone and search. Sure enough, on Twitter's trending topics, the headline Death of the Nemesis was prominently displayed. George looked at his daughter and sighed again. He was also somewhat depressed about the Nemesis's death. Then he saw his daughter walk away without looking back. What are you going to do? George called out. That General Ross, he should be taught a lesson. Gwen clenched her fists tightly, her voice choked with sobs. Stop. Are you crazy? George grabbed his daughter, urgently saying, the so-called Ghost Spider game is over now. Before you cause too much trouble, go home immediately. Dad, the problem isn't the Ghost Spider, it's that my friend has been killed. Gwen gently pushed George's hand away, then turned her back to the shouts behind her and left without looking back. What the hell did you say? The Nemesis is back in New York? Above Buffalo, Kingpin grabbed his subordinate by the throat, furious. Yes, boss, Kingpin's subordinate replied respectfully. According to the latest news, the Nemesis's real name was John Kent, a student at Midtown High School, but he just died in a fight with a monster. What did you say? That guy is dead. That guy actually died? He died before I could get my revenge. Thinking that his enemy, whom he had been wanting to kill for months, had tricked him again before his death, Kingpin was so angry he felt like his lungs were about to explode. Where are his family? Since he's dead, let his family pay the price. Kingpin's face broke into a sinister grin, but it quickly froze. Boss, according to Twitter users, the Nemesis is an orphan, his subordinate whispered. At this moment, even Kingpin's superhuman physique was throbbing with rage, feeling like a clown. He suspected the Nemesis was doing this on purpose. How could the Nemesis have anticipated and dodged so many of his decisions? Ah! Kingpin roared furiously, unleashing his weapon systems on the building in front of him in a fit of rage. The next moment, all sorts of micro-missiles were launched from his steel armor. Amid screams from the crowd, a terrifying explosion instantly snapped the building in half, sending up a cloud of dust as it crashed to the ground. Boss, what do we do next? His henchman asked cautiously from the side. Back to New York. Even though his family is gone, he still has classmates, Kingpin said, somewhat agitated. Midtown High School, right? Since the Nemesis is dead, none of you should lie either. As they spoke, 4 or 5 planes were flying towards them from afar. These steel legions were so conspicuous that they had been noticed upon arriving in New York, but their superior maneuverability prevented them from catching up. Perfect timing. I haven't finished venting yet, Kingpin ordered. Immediately dismantle those planes into skeletons. At his command, his hundreds of armored men swarmed forward, dismantling the planes in just a few minutes amidst the pilot's screams. Now follow me, let's head to New York. Damn it, I don't believe the skull can run away this time. Kingpin shouted, leading his soldiers back in a grand procession. While on Earth, various struggles raged for different purposes. The modification of the system in space was also completed. The warm glow emanating from his body gradually faded, replaced by John's body absorbing the sunlight at over 1,000,000% utilization. In the first minute, his previously shriveled cells rapidly replenished themselves. In the 5th minute, his dormant heart began to beat, and blood began to circulate throughout his body. In the 10th minute, his lifeless consciousness began to fluctuate, and his thoughts gradually regained control of his body. Finally. In the 3rd hour after John's death, a flicker of activity began to appear in his previously dormant brain. His tightly closed eyes slowly opened, and after a slight moment of confusion, he immediately understood his predicament. Not dead? Or rather, not really dead? John hovered in space, muttering to himself, but to be honest, I was a little scared. Although I don't know who launched the missile, it's probably related to the US government. I just need to politely ask at the White House. I almost got killed, haha, ho ho ha ho ha ho ho ha ho ha. John, recalling the pain of being enveloped in extreme light and heat, began to laugh maniacally. But his voice couldn't travel in the vastness of space, only he could feel the anger and killing intent contained within his laughter. After laughing for a full minute, it gradually subsided, replaced by an examination of his body. What is this? John looked at the black substance covering his entire body with suspicion. With his exceptionally sharp eyesight, he could see that this thing covering his skin was likely a special creature with consciousness. Because at a microscopic level, he could observe the docile consciousness conveyed by the substances covering his body, and subconsciously, he felt he could freely manipulate these substances. Venom? When did I get it on me? John muttered to himself. With a thought, the black substance above his neck began to fade rapidly, revealing his original handsome features. Interesting. John's lips curled into a smile. Now it was time to see how strong he had become. He felt brimming with power. In terms of pure strength, after just a short exposure to the sun, he could feel that he was at least 100 times stronger than a day ago, and was still growing stronger without any limit. Humans, your saviors, the Nemesis. No, the Nemesis is dead. Next time, I should consider changing the name. John thought to himself, anyway, I'm back. Then, with a thought, he vanished from his spot and rushed towards the azure planet below. Why does Kingpin seem like a die-hard Nemesis fanboy to me? Chapter 39 Black Battlesuit. Boom. In the suburbs of New York State, USA, deafening roars echoed from the sky. What's that sound? Is it thunder? A woman on a farm looked up at the tremors in the sky. She saw a huge hole explode in the center of the previously layered clouds, through which she could see the clear sky above. The culprit behind it all had vanished. Inside the atmosphere, John didn't activate his biofield, but instead relied solely on his physical body to fight against air resistance. Air resistance 1,000 times stronger than before was tearing at his body, but it couldn't stop him. 10 times the speed of sound, 20 times, 30 times. With a series of accelerations, his top speed stabilized at around 40 times. Within 100 meters of his body, the turbulent air became a terrifying biological no-go zone. Even steel would be warped, and an ordinary person entering would be instantly torn to shreds. System, display progress bar, John thought to himself. The next moment, a pale blue progress bar appeared before his eyes. 0.07%. So little. John frowned slightly and asked, System, how many times faster is the new progress than before? The system's mechanical voice replied in John's ear, reporting to the host, the previous 100% progress is equal to 1% now. So, if I were to commit evil now, how many people could I kill before you disintegrate? John asked calmly. The system was still very useful to him at the moment, and he didn't want to overuse it for revenge. Host, depending on the reasons and consequences of your evil deeds, as well as the degree of impact after your act, the number of people will fluctuate slightly, but it is estimated to be around 136. The system slowly answered. 100 people, that's not enough. Looks like I need to ramp up the progress bar a bit more before I can start my revenge. John grinned amiably. This is a serious matter. 100 deaths won't be enough to clean up the mess. I'm kind-hearted, I'll just multiply that number by 10. Ho ha ho ha. Amidst unrestrained laughter, John, clad in his venom suit, charged into the skies above New York City without slowing down. The terrifying shockwave instantly shattered the windows of the buildings below. In just 1 minute, John had reached his usual street from the outskirts of New York. His house was now surrounded by media, fans, and onlookers who knew his identity, all taking photos with their phones. Looking at the crowd below, a hint of impatience flashed in John's eyes. He slowed his speed to twice the speed of sound, preparing to give the people below a little punishment. But out of the corner of his eye, he noticed the house across from his own. A flicker of hesitation crossed his eyes, but he ultimately activated his biofield, slowly slowing down before gently landing in front of his house. The passers-by below had already noticed the anomaly in the sky. Seeing John, enveloped in black venom, land, they were utterly astonished. What's going on? Wasn't the Nemesis dead? One person asked incredulously. Why worry about that? This is the Nemesis. I'm going to get his autograph right now, a fan exclaimed excitedly. But these people were no match for the media reporters. The instant John landed, at least a dozen reporters, microphones in hand, rushed towards him, their eyes gleaming with the urge to grab a juicy story. Facing their excited gazes, John's eyes remained unmoved. He calmly said, "You're blocking my way a bit." Then, he slowly raised his right hand, looking at the men and women approaching him, and gently waved it. Boom. Accompanied by a sonic boom and a white shockwave, the terrifying airflow instantly swept away the dozen or so people in front of him, sending them tumbling and landing in the front yard of John's hut. Even those in the back rows were blown off balance by the strong airflow, tumbling over like fallen gourds. What is the Nemesis doing? That was the first thought in everyone's minds. How could this guy be so brutal? Some reporters still on the ground excitedly focused their cameras. Nothing was more sensational news than a Superman turning to the dark side. John ignored their actions, walking steadily towards the door. One or two reporters collapsed in front of him, and he simply stepped over them as he entered. Reaching the door, John transformed the venomous substance in his right hand into a key, inserted it into the lock, and easily opened the door, walking inside amidst the stares of those behind him. He seems completely different from the news, he's so fierce. Some questions arose behind John, but he ignored them completely. Entering the room, he went back to his bedroom, opened a closet, and there before him was a black suit modeled after Superman's costume from the movies. The suit consists of a top and a cape, lacking the hood from his previous Superman suit. Its design perfectly replicates the texture of Superman's uniform from the movies. Tony has insanely mixed vibranium powder into the suit, significantly increasing its defensive capabilities. It also perfectly fits John's physique in terms of elasticity. A grayish-white S within a triangle on the chest gives it a rustic, ancient feel. This was a request he made to Tony a few months ago, to have a suit made based on Superman's from the movies, with the main color changed to black. 2 months ago, Stark, having resolved his own safety issues, delivered the suit. John reached out and gently stroked the matte-textured suit. This suit was originally a reward he prepared to commemorate his future as the next stage of Superman, freeing him from hiding. However, months later, his mindset was completely different. John's mind raced, and the Venom suit in his hand extended, enveloping the armor in front of him. Within seconds, it completely absorbed the armor, returning to John's body with vibranium powder. In the blink of an eye, the venom on John's skin was identical in appearance to the vanished armor. The show's about to begin. Before it starts, how can I not prepare a cool outfit? John chuckled, adjusting his not-too-disheveled collar. Ready, John activated his X-ray vision, his terrifying eyes taking in half of New York City. I never imagined New York City was so dark behind the scenes. If I kill all these people, I should be able to kill another 100. John laughed, then noticed a large group of men in Iron Man suits giving a speech on his school's playground. The man speaking on the platform was none other than Kingpin. Chapter 40. Not kill? Not a chance. On the helicarrier, Nick Fury calmly faced the large screen before him. The screen displayed images of high-ranking representatives from various countries at the International Security Council. As a subordinate agency of the Council, SHIELD, Fury, as its director, naturally fell under their jurisdiction. Fury, what do you have to say about the events in New York? An elderly man on the screen asked, looking at Fury. You all have all the information about this incident, and I don't want to say much, Fury replied. Now I only hope that the aftermath can be minimized. Many people are already dissatisfied with General Ross's unilateral actions. This situation has escalated largely because of him, so I hope the American representative can handle it on his behalf. Fury looked at the American representative of the council. General Ross was indeed somewhat impulsive this time. I will suggest to the president that he go home and calm down for a few days, the American representative said with a forced smile. The other representatives paid little attention to his statement, as their primary concern was elsewhere. Fury, have you retrieved the bodies of John Kent and Emil? A representative asked. At this question, everyone's eyes revealed the utmost seriousness. They had already seen the footage of the battle between John and Abomination. The cataclysmic destruction it displayed had driven all factions to madness. Experts had analyzed that if these two wanted, they could completely paralyze the armed forces of a city within 5 hours. In terms of individual assassination, no one on Earth could currently escape the retaliation of two such individuals. If they could be replicated and used on soldiers, hundreds of millions of these terrifyingly mobile and extremely destructive creatures would be a deterrent more terrifying than nuclear weapons. So far, we've only recovered some of Abomination's body parts in New York State, but we haven't seen any of the Nemesis's body tissue, Nick Fury explained. Perhaps it was blown into outer space. Hearing Nick Fury's explanation, the representative's eyes turned serious. We are now entrusting you with full authority over the follow-up matters, but there's only one thing you must do. That is, you must recover the Nemesis's body. I don't care if it's in outer space or somewhere else. As for Abomination's body, we must expedite its research. These two things are the top priorities. As for funding, that's not a problem at all. All you have to do is act immediately. The council members chattered on, but Nick Fury listened to the report in his earpiece with astonishment. Wait? You said the Nemesis isn't dead, and he's returned to his house unharmed. Yes, Director. He even attacked and injured some bystanders around the hut. He seems a bit off right now, Coulson said through the earpiece, looking at the monitor. Upon hearing that the Nemesis hadn't died, the council members on the screen exchanged knowing glances, their unspoken message clear: the Nemesis may not be dead, but he could die. But Director, you might be interested in something else, Coulson said. Just now, 100 terrorists wearing armor similar to Tony Stark's arrived in New York City and are now heading towards the downtown area. Stark's suit, and 100 of them? Nick Fury was stunned. Where did they get 100? Stark doesn't have that many. This might be related to the criminal in Monaco a few months ago. Wasn't that guy kidnapped? We were keeping a close eye on him for a while, Coulson said, looking down at his research report. Alright, looks like today's tasks have gotten heavier, Nick Fury said curtly. You first informed Tony about the Iron Legion. Oh, and remember to tell him his savior is still alive. Fury, about the Nemesis. The council tried to say something, but Fury interrupted them. Let's focus on dealing with the Iron Legion first. To be honest, our conventional forces are completely ineffective against them. Are we going to follow Ross's example and drop another nuclear bomb in the city? Fury, of course, understood what these people meant and proactively changed the subject. Or, how about we get the Nemesis to help deal with the Iron Legion? Based on his previous performance, I don't think it'll be a problem. After a moment of silence, the council offered a suggestion. Look who this is, isn't it our old friend Kingpin? We were just wondering how to get enough men, and now he's conveniently delivered himself to our doorstep. John's eyes gleamed, and the next moment he burst through the wooden house, flying at full speed towards Midtown High School. After dealing with Kingpin, and taking a few more criminals' lives to make up the numbers, next it should be time to take up arms and go to the White House to find out how the Nemesis died, John thought to himself, and in just 4 or 5 seconds he arrived at Midtown High School, where he used to study. At this moment, Kingpin had already arrived here, and he blew up the roof of the teaching building with a raised hand. In the dust, a large number of teachers and students were rushed to the sports field by his men. All the students had just been escorted here when they saw the philanthropist who had been beaten into the hospital by the Nemesis before. He was now wearing a large armor more than 3 meters high and standing on the rostrum. Looking at the large number of teachers and students on the sports field, Jin Bin said to the microphone, "Students of Hongchang High School, I have to announce the good news, that is, Nemesis is dead. Unfortunately, he did not die in my hands, but died under a stupid order from a stupid general who came out of nowhere. But I am not sad, because there are you, Nemesis's classmates and teachers, and I will use death to make up for the regret that I did not kill Nemesis." Hearing Jin Bin's speech, all the students on the playground felt unreasonable. Huge curses and protests came from the students, but Jin was not affected at all. He raised the hand cannon in his hand and aimed it at the crowd in front of him. Amidst the terrified gazes of the teachers and students, the light from Kingpin's palm-fired cannon grew ever brighter, but just before it exploded, a figure clad in a black robe landed like a meteorite, blocking Kingpin's path. The blinding laser struck the figure's chest, producing only a few sparks before falling silent. "I heard you were looking for me," John said, snapping off the arm that had fired the cannon before Kingpin's astonished eyes, then piercing his heart without hesitation with his right hand. In a mere instant, John broke his own 6-month-long record of not killing. And in his final moments, Kingpin uttered his last, bewildered words, "King, alien?" Chapter 41 I Don't Kill Those Who Surrender. On the playground of Midtown High School, under the watchful eyes of thousands of teachers and students, John's right arm pierced Kingpin's chest without resistance. As John withdrew his right hand, Kingpin's tall body collapsed with a thud, and everyone was stunned by the bloody scene before them. For his first murder, John felt not a trace of guilt. Looking at the bright red blood staining his right arm, John waved his hand dismissively, shaking off the blood, and turned back to look at the Steel Legion escorting the teachers and students. "Wow, that's quite a large-scale operation," John remarked. Through his superior hearing, he could feel the slow, powerful beating of each of these people's hearts, meaning they were all enhanced humans with physical abilities far exceeding those of ordinary people. The stunned silence continued, the entire playground silent. John's gaze swept over the stunned crowd, his X-ray vision allowing him to see their faces behind their steel helmets, quickly leading him to a familiar face. Within the Steel Legion, Tombstone trembled, a bad premonition rising within him. Sure enough, the next moment. "Isn't that Tombstone? We haven't seen each other for over a month, have we?" John grinned, asking the person inside the Iron Man suit in a certain direction. "Nemesis." Tombstone stammered, but his head deflated like a punctured balloon in the next instant. Amidst the terrified gazes of the entire arena, John had somehow moved closer to Tombstone, pressing his ear close and asking, "What did you say? I didn't quite catch that." Clang. The sound of metal hitting the ground echoed clearly across the silent training ground. It was the Iron Man helmet Tombstone was wearing. On the titanium alloy helmet, a clear handprint crushed the bulging helmet, revealing Tombstone's head, which had been on his neck just moments before. John casually slammed Tombstone's body, along with the suit, into the hard ground of the training ground, preventing the blood from the severed carotid artery from splattering onto himself. John seemed to only then understand the tombstone's last words, sighing, "The nemesis is dead, so I don't want you to call him that name anymore. From today onward, you can call me Homelander." "I deserve it," John announced, spreading his hands to everyone present. Cold sweat poured from everyone's foreheads, the fear intensifying among the Iron Legion members. Only Kingpin's men, who had clearly been injected with a modified lizard serum and possessed superior physical abilities, could truly feel the terror John instilled in them. If Gwen could still barely keep up with John's fight against Abomination, now, with John's attack, these Legion members, whose physical abilities were no less than Gwen's, couldn't even see how John appeared beside them. "We'll die. We'll die. We'll die," these were the thoughts frantically racing through their minds. Seemingly driven by animalistic instinct, these people, gripped by extreme fear, the First Legion aimed their weapon systems at John, followed by the second, the third, the fourth. Like a chain reaction, within a second, the vast majority of the Steel Legion members present simultaneously aimed their palm cannons at John. The next moment, blinding white light flashed. Seeing hundreds of palm cannons illuminate, piercing screams erupted from the teachers and students once more. "So noisy," John muttered, silently watching their attack, waiting a moment. A palm cannon only needs a second to charge from launch to detonation, but for John, that was far too long. His figure flickered briefly, reappearing on his side on the platform, his left hand propping up his head, quietly watching the performance below. Below, the numerous Steel Legion members who had aimed their palm cannons at John were suddenly struck by the side of John vanished, their own palm cannons now pointed at their foreheads. Boom! John mouthed an explosion on the platform. The next moment, hundreds of heads were pierced through by beams of light from their own arms. The intense heat even scorched the wounds, yet not a drop of blood flowed. Wah! Almost simultaneously, the screams throughout the hall ceased, replaced by a series of whimpers. Only then did the screaming teachers and students realize that their hands had been tightly covering their mouths, turning their screams into whimpers. "Don't worry, everyone, it's safe now." John jumped down from the platform, raising his hands high, and said, "As long as my countrymen are by your side, you absolutely don't need to worry about your safety." "John, are you John Kent?" At this moment, a trembling voice came from the crowd. "Oh, of course it's me, Mr. James." John turned his head with a gentle smile. "Don't worry, everyone at school is my friend. I'll protect you all." "That's good, that's good." James finally relaxed. "With you here, we're relieved." The teachers and students, who had been terrified, immediately broke into smiles after John's statement. Suddenly, someone shouted from the crowd, "Long live Homelander!" This shout spurred all the teachers and students to join in. As for the hundreds of people John had killed on the playground, no one mentioned it, and no one dared to. It seemed everyone had forgotten that just a minute earlier, they had almost been killed. Amidst the cheers, John's lips curled into a smile. Would he reveal that the first shout of "Long live Homelander" in the crowd was actually his own supersonic infiltration and shout? Hey! Just as all the teachers and students were caught up in the revelry, a figure quietly slipped away from the crowd. In the earlier battle, this somewhat cowardly individual hadn't joined the fray like the others, which temporarily saved him. Upon seeing his companion's death, he almost immediately removed his armor and mingled into the crowd, intending to escape while they cheered. But the next moment, his body stiffened as a hand landed on his shoulder. "Hey, friend, give me some face and join the fun," John said, his tone intimately familiar, though he'd never seen this man before. Almost instantly, the man knelt down, trembling. "I surrender. I was forced by Kingpin. Please spare me." "Don't be like that," John said hesitantly, "I don't kill those who surrender." Hearing this, the man lowered his head even further, almost as if trying to appear harmless. Just when he thought he was going to survive, he opened his eyes to see John handing him a fire axe, saying gently, "So take a weapon to protect yourself." At that moment, the man felt as if he had fallen into an ice cellar. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 42: Tracing the Criminals from the Source. John casually incinerated a last enemy in front of him with his heat vision, then turned to face the terrified teachers and students staring at him, and took a step forward. Just John's approach caused them to recoil several steps back, as if death itself were closing in on them. "Don't be so scared, I just have a few questions," John said, waving his hand. "For example, why don't I see Gwen among you? Shouldn't she be at school at this time?" John asked. After a brief silence, Teacher James stepped forward and said, "Gwen's father gave her a day off, saying she wasn't feeling well. But there are rumors online that you were killed by General Ross with a missile. We were just mourning your death," James said. "General Ross?" John looked at James with a puzzled smile. "I've only been gone for less than 12 hours. Logically, you shouldn't have received news of my death so quickly. It was Iron Man. He announced your death on Twitter and then publicly questioned the authority of the U.S. government," James explained. Faced with James's answer, John's faint smile froze. After a moment of silence, he turned to look at the hundreds of corpses around him, their brains pierced, lost in thought. But in the end, he shook his head, banishing the extraneous thoughts, glanced at the timid teachers and students, and said nothing more. Instead, he soared into the sky, flying towards a certain direction in the city. Wow. 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 10 minutes later, Stark received Fury's message and arrived at Midtown High School. Looking at the piles of corpses below, he exclaimed, "What's going on?" After striking a pose in the air, he landed smoothly in his armor and asked the few teachers who remained, "What happened here?" "Iron Man." Finally seeing a normal superhero, the teachers exclaimed with delight. The students were just surrounded by these people, and then Homelander, formerly known as Nemesis, helped us deal with these criminals. Stark, who had just learned from Kelson that John was still alive, had no objection to John's appearance, but reacted strongly to the corpses scattered on the ground. "You're saying this was the work of the Nemesis?" Stark asked incredulously. "He wasn't this direct when he attacked before. Jarvis, pull up the school's surveillance footage. I need to see what happened," Stark ordered, and holographic footage immediately appeared inside his armor. But after watching the entire footage, he fell silent, his eyes filled with grave seriousness. "Jarvis, this is a big problem. Report John's location to me immediately." "According to the surveillance, Mr. John is currently at SYNOPSIS prison," Jarvis said calmly. "What's he doing at the prison?" A hint of doubt flashed in Stark's eyes. "Killing people," Jarvis replied. "According to the surveillance statistics, at least 100 prisoners have been killed so far." "What?" Stark was shocked upon hearing this. Without hesitation, he put on his mask and leaped into the air. At that moment, in SYNOPSIS prison in New York, countless prisoners were whispering among themselves during their lunch break, excitedly sharing the news they had just heard. "Hey, heard? The Nemesis is dead. We won't have to be so worried about committing crimes after he gets out of prison," a man with a tattoo on his neck said cheerfully. "I've been hoping he'd die. So arrogant, he'd get himself into big trouble sooner or later," another criminal said. "I remember you used to be most afraid of Kekshan. Now that he's dead, you can breathe a sigh of relief," the tattooed man said. But as soon as he finished speaking, the other man's expression changed instantly. "Kekshan? What a joke. That guy should be afraid of me. He's just a coward who doesn't even dare to kill. Even if he were alive, I'd still go out and commit crimes. At most, I'd go back to prison again. If I died in front of him, I'm afraid he'd wet his pants in fear." The tattooed man nodded in deep agreement, and then the two said together, "To crime. To crime." The two criminals lightly clinked their glasses together and smiled at each other. In fact, in this prison, no, it should be said that since John's debut, most of the inmates in New York City prisons were sent there by him. So it's no wonder they were so excited to hear that Kekshan was dead. Just as they were chatting and laughing, suddenly, the alarms throughout the entire prison system suddenly went off. The criminals thought another villain had escaped. But when they looked up, they saw blinding red laser cleave the upper half of the entire prison in two. Even the prison guards watching the prisoners were terrified by the flash of red light. "What's going on? What was that?" someone asked. But soon, the severed roof began to float up, dust spilling from the gap. Before long, the entire prison roof was completely suspended in midair. They were shocked to see a handsome boy in black armor and a red cape, single-handedly supporting the upper half of the prison from beneath the roof. Instantly, questions like "Who is he, and what is he doing here?" flooded the prisoners' minds. But the more astute guards, who recognized John, pointed at him and exclaimed, Killer, you're not dead? Killer? This is the fucking killer? All the prisoners stared at the figure floating in midair, the red cape billowing in the wind, their doubts deepening. Were they out of touch with the times? They knew who the nemesis was, but why was the other person's uniform different? Weren't superheroes supposed to be masked? Most importantly, what was this guy doing here? John hoisted the entire prison onto his shoulder and tossed it aside with a loud thud. Looking at the figures below, looking up at him, John laughed. Just now, I searched all over New York, but I found that the number of criminals was simply not enough. Finally, I realized, why look for criminals elsewhere? Aren't all the criminals in prisons damn scum? I was originally thinking of keeping you guys around. After all, killing you after you've served your purpose is nowhere near as effective as a steady stream of income. But I'm in a bad mood right now, so for my small goal of 1,000 people, I have no choice but to make things difficult for you. As John spoke, he sighed helplessly, then realized and said, did I just blurt out what was on my mind? You guys know a little too much? In an instant, blinding red light shot out from John's eyes, and in just a moment, the terrifying heat melted the heads of hundreds of criminals into pools of blood. The nemesis killed someone. The nemesis who never kills actually killed someone. Seeing the criminals die beside them, all the criminals were reminded of the fear of being ruled by the nemesis. Chapter 43, Storming the White House. Ah! The nemesis killed someone. Is there no justice? Is there no law? Mommy, save me. Inside the shrunken prison, huge screams echoed from the mouths of the criminals who considered themselves psychologically superior. Looking at the pig-like screams of the criminals below, John hovered in the air, clutching his stomach and laughing maniacally. Of course, after dealing with over 100 criminals, he didn't continue killing, because the remaining guys hadn't committed crimes punishable by death. Before opening the prison gates, he had already checked the database to check these people's crimes, to prevent any mistaken killings and system errors. So, the guys he had just killed were all innocent victims who deserved to be executed. The prison guard looked at the large number of corpses lying around him, his heart almost breaking, but when he turned his head, he saw the nemesis standing in front of him, startling him. Wow, what do you need me for? The guard asked cautiously. I've changed my name to Homelander now, not that bullshit nemesis you were yelling about. To be honest, I've always objected to that pun-based name the media gave me. John said seriously, when the reporters asked later, please let them know for me. No problem. Hearing that John needed his help, the guard breathed a sigh of relief, at least he wouldn't be killed for no reason. Thank you, you guys are the real heroes. John smiled and pointed at the guard with both hands, then disappeared from the spot. Phew, he survived. Seeing John disappear, the guard breathed a sigh of relief, then sighed, how did he become like this? I used to like him quite a bit, but now. Well, you should like me even more now. The next moment, John's figure reappeared, patted the guard on the shoulder, and left again. This time, the guard's body suddenly froze completely, and he didn't dare to move for a long time. Meanwhile, John, who had left, traveled back and forth between more than 40 different prisons and detention centers in New York in one day. With his frantic efforts to catch everyone, plus the contributions of the Kingpin Legion, he successfully brought his progress bar to 1,100 people. But at the same time, he encountered a small problem. That night, while cleaning the last few prisons, a figure in red armor blocked his way. Kent, I think we should talk, Tony Stark said seriously, stopping John as he was about to leave. Tony, I have something to do right now. Can we talk after I'm done? John casually shrugged. Also, I'm very grateful for your righteous words. Something else? You mean continuing about how you killed nearly 10,000 humans in one day? Stark looked at John, who was wearing the armor he had given him, and said calmly, Kid, you've changed a bit. Hey, I only killed the bastards. Up until now, the only ones I've killed were those whose deaths would promote peace among humanity, John said. Maybe, John thought about the 5 or 6 instances of wrongful convictions he'd encountered while cleaning the prisons. Clearly, the American justice system had also made mistakes. Even if those were criminals, they should be judged by the justice system. This is a crime, Tony said earnestly, placing his hands on John's shoulders. I didn't see you hold back when you were killing mercenaries in Afghanistan, John whispered, just loud enough for the other to hear. Some online statistics showed that, up to Avengers, Age of Ultron, Iron Man had killed at least 70,000 people, most of whom were killed during the Battle of New York, thanks to the nuclear bomb he launched. This made Stark's face flush red and then pale, but he didn't react, asking, "Okay, can you tell me why you killed so many people?" To build up energy for something big, of course, Jon thought to himself, but he didn't say it aloud. He knew that if Stark reacted so strongly to killing just 10,000 villains, they would likely break off their relationship if Stark knew what he was about to do. Frankly, he was somewhat touched by what Stark had done after his disappearance, and Stark had helped him many times before. He really didn't want to fall out with him unless absolutely necessary. "Tony, I hope you won't interfere with what happens next. Maybe we can go out for a drink after everything is completely finished." Stark's expression changed. "What else do you want to do? You're young, you have plenty of opportunities, don't." Before he could finish, Jon withdrew his hand, and the other man had already fallen into a deep, infant-like sleep. "Just lie there. When you get up, it will all be over." Jon looked indifferently at Stark lying on the ground, stomped his foot, and disappeared from the spot. Having resolved the potential threat of the system's disintegration, it was time to go to the White House and have a good chat with the country's leader. Thinking of the excruciating pain he had felt earlier, a ruthless glint appeared in his eyes as he focused his gaze on a landmark building in another city. The White House, located on Pennsylvania Avenue in Washington, D.C., is nearly 400 kilometers from New York. But for Jon, who could fly at full speed exceeding 40 times the speed of sound, it would only take half a minute to arrive. The White House was as quiet and peaceful as ever today, but a figure descending from the sky shattered the tranquil atmosphere. After a half-minute flight, Jon swooped down, landing arrogantly at the White House entrance. The instant he landed, the ground within 100 meters of him collapsed, sending chunks of earth and brick flying into the air. Once the dust settled, revealing Jon's figure, he began to walk step by step into the White House. With each step, the entire White House went into high alert, a large number of heavily armed agents surrounding him, pointing various weapons at Jon. "Put down your weapons. Whoever you are, you have threatened American national security. Take another step, and we'll open fire," a general shouted. But the general found that the man before him had no intention of backing down, ignoring his words, and simply said, "I just want to talk to your president. I don't want to waste the list of 1,000 dead on you. Don't get in my way." After saying this, Jon continued walking inside. Through his X-ray vision, he could already see the president inside the White House. Seeing that the man in front of him showed no sign of stopping, the general ordered without hesitation, "Fire." The next moment, a massive amount of ammunition poured from the muzzle of the gun at Jon, but it could only produce a few sparks on Jon's body before falling to the ground. Chapter 44: Slapping the President. Night fell. At the White House gates, Jon strode forward, step by step, into the White House. Around him, countless agents pointed their guns at him, firing wildly, but their bullets couldn't even penetrate his uniform. Seemingly annoyed by the mosquito-like attacks, Jon raised his right hand and slammed it down. A powerful gust of wind instantly swept through the area, sending the surrounding agents fleeing. Seeing these men, even after falling, still trying to get up and attack again, Jon frowned, then raised his hand and threw a powerful punch. Under the bright moonlight, a visible storm instantly destroyed everything in its path, kicking up clouds of dust. Before Jon, a 100-meter-long trail of ruins had formed. "Hopefully this will calm you down," Jon said calmly. Then, ignoring the stunned expressions of the agents around him, he hovered and flew inwards. Meanwhile, inside the White House, "President, the helicopter is ready. Let's leave now," an agent said, approaching him. "What just happened? How did the alarm trigger?" asked the current U.S. President, Ellis. The situation was so urgent that he didn't yet know the details. "It's unclear at the moment. According to reports, a superhuman attempted to attack from the White House main entrance," the agent replied. "A superhuman? How superhuman? To be able to let me leave the White House under Secret Service protection?" Ellis asked curiously as he boarded the helicopter. "How does it compare to that nemesis and abomination from this morning?" His curiosity was quickly answered, for just as his left foot stepped onto the helicopter steps, a deafening explosion echoed from afar. "What was that sound?" Ellis turned around in confusion. Then he saw a massive cloud of dust billowing up behind him, rapidly spreading towards them. Everything in its path, flowers, trees, buildings, was utterly destroyed. "OMG!" Ellis practically screamed, Looking at this scene of utter catastrophe, he thought he was about to die. But to his surprise, the storm's terrifying destructive power had been completely diminished after destroying numerous buildings and vegetation along its path. When it finally reached him, all that remained was a howling wind that whipped his suit jacket around in the wind. OMG! 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 The president, a survivor, patted his chest, repeatedly exclaiming in relief. If he were a few years older, he might have been scared to death. Just as he was still reeling from the shock, a series of exclamations came from beside him. Well, well, well. John floated along the rubble he had created, arriving before the president. He sized up the old man's face with a look of disdain, then said flippantly, "The President of the United States? The highest-ranking official I've ever met before was just a police chief. But to me, you all seem pretty much the same." Looking at John, who was so close, Ellis immediately recognized him as the man in the photo in the documents he'd been approaching. He exclaimed in surprise, "Nemesis? You're not." Slap. Before Ellis could finish, John slapped him across the face, knocking him off the plane steps. "How many times have I told you? Call me Homelander. It's been a whole day already. Looks like your intelligence system is a bit outdated, Mr. President," John said, somewhat troubled. Ellis lay on the ground, clutching his bruised cheek, staring at John in disbelief. No one had ever dared to treat him like this. Seeing the other party still looking confused and aggrieved, John waved his hand helplessly and said, all right, it seems you still don't understand what happened. In that case, I'll take a small loss and give you an hour to discuss it." He put his hands on his hips, looking like he was making a huge sacrifice. "In this hour, I hope you can quickly figure out the current situation, and then do your best to meet my demands. Once you've satisfied me, I can let you go." Under the tense gaze of the Secret Service agents, John gently helped Ellis up, then gently patted her shoulder and said, "I'll leave for a while to prepare a gift for you." After saying that, John kicked off and disappeared from the president's sight. "Has he left?" a Secret Service agent asked from the side. "Of course not, didn't you hear him say he'll be back in an hour?" Ellis suppressed his anger and said, "Now, get all the cabinet secretaries and generals above the rank of general in the United States up to the highest alert level. Also, transfer me to SHIELD and have them join in." Ellis said seriously, "I have a feeling that if we anger that madman, a disaster more terrifying than the Civil War will occur." "Yes, Mr. President." The Secret Service agent nodded immediately and had his subordinate start making contact, but was then stopped by Ellis. "Mr. President, is there anything else?" the agent asked, puzzled. "Don't notify General Ross yet, inform him after this is over." Ellis thought of the feud between John and Ross in the documents from that morning and gave the order. "Yes, Mr. President." The agent immediately agreed. On the helicarrier, Nick Fury was looking down at John's daily report when his cell phone rang. He took out his phone, glanced at the caller ID, and was surprised to see that it was the President of the United States. He then immediately pressed the answer button. "Mr. President, what's the matter with this sudden switch to SHIELD?" Nick Fury asked. "Just now, John Kent raided the White House. So far, over a dozen agents have died and dozens more have been injured," Ellis said gravely. "What?" Nick Fury's heart skipped a beat. He hurriedly asked, "How are you all doing? Are you all right?" "We're fine for now. He gave us an hour to prepare. After that, he'll come back to the White House. If he's still not satisfied with the outcome, we're probably about to face a human nuclear weapon," Ellis sighed. "What are his conditions?" Nick Fury asked. "That's what we're going to discuss next. He hasn't said yet, but I suspect it's related to Ross." "Ross? I should be able to guess what he's going to ask for." Nick Fury sighed. Ever since he learned of John's resurrection, the thing he had been fearing had finally happened. Chapter 45 Superman came to my side. Late at night, in the White House, President Ellis, his face swollen, stared intently at the large screen in front of him. On the screen, the top leaders of the entire American military and political establishment were gathered, awaiting the president's orders. Beside Ellis, the vice president, the president of the Senate, and the secretaries of state, who had arrived at the White House within 20 minutes, joined the meeting directly. "Gentlemen, just now, the White House was invaded by Homelander," Ellis began. No one spoke at the unfamiliar name Homelander, knowing Ellis would explain. "Sure enough," Ellis quickly explained, "Homelander, John Kent, once nicknamed the Nemesis, was hit by an intercontinental ballistic missile launched by Ross during the battle with Abomination this morning. When he reappeared, he looked like this. The president pointed, and a surveillance video was projected onto the large screen, showing John's attack on the White House. It lasted less than a minute, yet it caused everyone's faces to change. How is this possible? The governors and generals who were witnessing this for the first time were filled with disbelief. If everything shown in the video is true, it would completely reshape their worldview shaped over the past few decades. After all, how could a carbon-based life form possess such destructive power with just a physical body? I know it's hard for you all to accept, but this is just the tip of the iceberg of their strength, the president said helplessly. Now, let the director of SHIELD tell you more detailed information. The director of SHIELD, everyone looked over and noticed a black man wearing an eye patch emerging from a dark corner. He hadn't been noticed before because of the dim lighting. Nick Fury nodded to the president and said, based on our current information, Homelander's abilities include a biofield, freezing breath, heat vision, a strength starting at 100,000 tons, and a flight speed exceeding 40 times the speed of sound. Wait, are you telling a story? A governor objected. Do you think we haven't read DC Comics? Everyone knows these are all Superman's abilities. Yes, these are all Superman's abilities. Based on Homelander's current abilities, he's a Superman straight out of a DC comic book, Nick Fury said, picking up a Superman comic book. What's even more terrifying is that, according to our speculation, the strength he's currently displaying is only in his youth. Youth? Does that mean there's a mature stage, a perfect stage, and so on? An official inquired. That's right, Nick Fury nodded. This morning, he was still in his childhood, displaying strength at the level of early DC Comics. When he reappeared, his strength had increased at least 100-fold. No one knows how he suddenly became so strong in a single day, but if you were to fight Abomination again now, it would probably only take a second for Abomination to die at his hands. Unfortunately, when a Superman appears alive before us, we don't have kryptonite to restrain him. Leaving aside the serious meeting at the White House, John returned to New York after leaving the White House and randomly chose a restaurant. After ordering a large amount of food, he ate it bite by bite, oblivious to the onlookers nearby. To be honest, this was the first time he had tasted food in months, and the delicious flavors made him even happier. Hey, hello, are you the Nemesis? A girl mustered her courage and asked. In the evening, after learning that John hadn't died at all, Stark retracted his tweet and issued a clarification, so these people weren't surprised by John's resurrection. John, however, simply ate his food silently, showing no intention of acknowledging him. I'm a fan, can I get an autograph? Looking at John's handsome profile, even eating looked so good on him, the girl continued to ask expectantly, but was met with silence again. John had no intention of paying her any attention. Once the media exposed everything about his day tonight, all the praise would turn into vicious contempt. There was no need for any more pretense. Looking at the indifferent Nemesis, the girl's eyes dimmed. But as John ate, the expression of enjoyment on his face froze, because he realized he didn't have any money on him. For months, he had had no entertainment, traveling either by plane or on foot, with nowhere to spend money, and now he was in a real predicament. Steal? Rob it? Or just leave? Both seemed shameful. Looking at the unfinished food in front of him, John, who had killed tens of thousands in a single day, unexpectedly fell silent. Just as he was struggling with this dilemma, a figure rushed in. Seeing John, her eyes lit up, and she approached. The figure reached out her right hand to slap John's shoulder, but just as she was about to strike, John, without hesitation, grabbed her neck, his eyes flashing with impatient crimson light. Don't you know not to disturb me, Gwen, little Spider-Man? Who else could it be but Gwen in her Spider-Man suit standing before John? He instinctively released her and sat back down. Cough, cough, cough. Gwen coughed twice, then looked John up and down and said, "You seem like a completely different person, so irritable." "I haven't changed, I'm just letting my true nature show." John continued eating his food and said, "You've come at the right time. I didn't bring any money, can you pay for me?" After Gwen went to pay and returned, John casually asked, "Why weren't you at school today?" "Mr. James said Chief George got you a day off." After hearing about your death, I went to see General Ross." Gwen paused for a moment before slowly saying, "Oh, and then?" John paused, then continued. Of course, I gave him a good beating. But knowing you're still alive, I'm so glad I didn't kill him, otherwise I would be a murderer locked up by you. Gwen's face behind the mask was beaming with an unusually happy smile. But John, standing to the side, gradually fell silent, unsure of what to say next. Clearly, Gwen was still unaware of what had happened. After finishing his food, John left the restaurant to leave. Behind him, Gwen asked, "Hey, are you coming to school tomorrow? Even though your identity has been exposed, I'm sure they won't mind a superhero at school." John didn't answer, but instead manipulated his bioforce to soar into the sky. He glanced back at the girl below before flying towards Liberty Island. Chapter 46: Unleashing Freedom in the White House. On Liberty Island in New York City, a colossal statue holding aloft a torch stands tall. The Statue of Liberty, officially the Statue of Liberty National Monument, is also known as Liberty Enlightening the World. In 1865, Edouard de la Braille suggested that France present a statue representing liberty to the United States on the centenary of its founding. The entire statue weighs 450,000 pounds and stands 46 meters tall. The Statue of Liberty wears ancient Greek-style clothing and a radiant crown with 7 points symbolizing the 7 continents. Her right hand holds aloft the torch symbolizing liberty, while her left hand holds the Declaration of Independence. At her feet are broken handcuffs, shackles, and chains, symbolizing liberation from tyranny and the attainment of freedom. Since its construction, the statue has been a daily landmark, attracting countless visitors. And today, one person will bring a small change to the Statue of Liberty. Arriving on Liberty Island, gazing at this majestic statue over 40 meters high, John's lips curled into a smile. In an instant, tourists near the island could see a blinding crimson beam of light flash across the base beneath the Statue of Liberty's skirt. At first, the tourists didn't understand what was happening, but soon, the sound of steel scraping against each other as the statue, now unsupported, began to emanate from it, its body losing its balance. When the statue had tilted by 15 degrees, the tourists finally understood what was happening, and various gasps of surprise rose from the crowd. Just as they thought the statue was about to collapse and prepared to flee, they were astonished to find that the goddess not only stopped tilting but also floated up. Below the statue, John, with the statue supported by his right hand, hovered high in the air, his gaze sweeping over the upturned crowd before refocusing on Washington. He took a deep breath, tightened his grip on the Statue of Liberty, and then, as if taking a running start, took 2 steps forward before hurling the statue in his right hand. Bang! 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 Instantly, the 45-meter-long colossal statue, like a javelin, broke through the sound barrier, piercing the sky and soaring straight into the heavens under the moonlight. John leaped high into the air the instant the statue was launched, using it as a springboard to propel himself towards Washington. This sculpture was his grand gift to the White House. He believed that once he brought freedom to the White House, their attitudes would soften. Meanwhile, on Liberty Island below, tourists who had come to admire the Statue of Liberty covered their ears at the moment it broke the sound barrier, only to find the base empty when they recovered. The goddess flew away. An elderly man who had witnessed the entire Statue of Liberty soaring through the sky muttered to himself. Back at the White House, the group's discussion was drawing to a close. Realizing that with current technology, unless John didn't use his speed of over 40 times the speed of sound to dodge and instead deliberately took the nuclear explosion head-on, they couldn't harm him, the officials abandoned any intention of confronting him directly. Finally, Ellis made the decisive statement, "Gentlemen, in other words, if Homelander's demands aren't excessive, we can agree to his conditions. But what if they are excessive?" Nick Fury, sitting in the corner, thought to himself, but didn't ask, as it would make the situation extremely awkward. If John's demands weren't unreasonable, they'd agree. If they were, they'd reluctantly agree. This was an unspoken understanding among most of those present. Of course, if things really escalated to that point, they'd still want to argue their case. After the discussion ended, Ellis and the others, seeing that time was running out, quietly waited for John's arrival. Only 2 minutes left until the appointed time, Ellis said, glancing at the time. "Homelander said he had a big gift for us. I wonder what it is, but it doesn't feel like anything good." Just as Ellis spoke, he noticed the Secretary of State beside him looking out a conference room window. "What are you looking at? Has Homelander arrived?" Ellis looked over too, only to find the view outside empty, except for a small black dot the size of a soybean on the bright moon. "What's that?" Ellis rubbed his eyes, And when he opened them again, he was shocked to find that the black dot on the moon had grown to the size of an egg. That's... Nick Fury narrowed his eyes. His excellent physical abilities allowed him to see the shape of the object first, but his expression changed instantly. Fuck, that's the Statue of Liberty. Almost the instant he noticed it, Nick Fury, displaying his excellent agent skills, lifted Ellis up and pulled her back. At this moment, the officials on the other side of the screen were still unaware of what had happened. What Statue of Liberty? What had happened? But in the blink of an eye, they saw a head smash through half a house with a deafening roar, its massive head facing the screen. Even through the screen, seeing the head that filled the entire screen, cold sweat instantly broke out on everyone's back. How could the Statue of Liberty be here? The people present were all well-known American officials, naturally recognizing their country's landmark. Looking at the sculpture with half its face buried in the ground, a huge sense of absurdity rose from the bottom of their hearts. I'm so glad I landed safely and no one was killed. John jumped off the massive statue of the goddess, brushed imaginary dust off his hands, and turned to the president. What's your decision? Have you agreed to my request? Request? Ellis, still somewhat shaken, asked in confusion, you haven't made your request yet. Oh, I haven't. Well, I'll make it now. John said nonchalantly, all you need is for your U.S. government to execute everyone, starting with General Ross, who was directly or indirectly involved in launching missiles at me, on charges of treason. That'll be fine. Everyone? Even though Ellis was prepared, she was shocked by John's suggestion. Do you know how many people are involved? At least 100 people will die for no reason. What? 100 people? A look of shock flashed across John's face. Sensing that John had realized the seriousness of the situation, Ellis nodded repeatedly. Yes, at least 100 people, So, let's just add another 900 people, as an extra. John said nonchalantly, examining his fingernails. I remember Ross has a military base, right? We can pick the rest from there. There's a saying, treat relatives and friends, so let's start by killing the ones with high positions at that base. Chapter 47 The Brain in the Anus. Inside the White House, John's words made everyone present look grim. His request was indeed difficult. He was asking the president to order the killing of 1,000 of his own soldiers. This wasn't like a natural disaster or man-made calamity, it was an order from the president, the supreme leader, a completely different matter. If John himself were to take action, even wiping out a small town of 10,000 people, as long as no stubborn fool like Stark appeared, they could easily cover it up. But asking them to kill 1,000 of their own was a different story. Whoever gave the order would have their political or military career over on the spot. Avoiding imprisonment would be a miracle. Seeing their hesitation, John asked curiously, what's wrong? Is this so difficult? Mr. John, your request is indeed somewhat beyond our capabilities. The Secretary of State beside the president began to speak, but in an instant, he dissolved into a pool of splattered blood. John withdrew his burning gaze and sneered, I told you it would be difficult, and you really won't do it? You're really asking for trouble. I'm warning you, I'm furious right now. I won't use Ross's life to appease me, I'll just play with you for a bit. America is a modern nation with 300 million people, and you are its highest leaders. If you don't obey, we'll bring in a new batch of obedient dogs. Now I ask again, who's in favor and who's opposed? John looked around, everyone present, including Nick Fury, remained silent. But on the screen, a man in his 40s or 50s glared angrily at John, saying, I oppose it. America will never compromise. You're trampling on American law. Oh. John narrowed his eyes, looking at the man's face on the screen. His identity immediately came to mind. The governor of Massachusetts, white, right? John stared at the figure on the screen. The weapon of criticism cannot replace the criticism of weapons. You think I can't hurt you through a screen? John asked doubtfully, then soared into the sky and disappeared from the spot. Run, white. It's obvious he's coming this way. On the screen, a governor from another state urged him. A flicker of panic crossed White's eyes. He quickly nodded to everyone present and turned to leave in a panic. What do we do now? Ellis looked at Nick Fury, now hoping for advice from this professional. But to his disappointment, Nick Fury slowly shook his head, saying, I'll conduct a new assessment of Homelander's mental state, but we currently have no way to restrain him. Unless we get this guy into contact with a Tesseract, perhaps we can banish him into space. Nick Fury thought to himself, but didn't say it aloud. Seeing that Nick Fury was also helpless, a sense of desolation rose in Ellis's heart, but in the blink of an eye, John descended from the sky and landed in front of him. So fast, everyone present couldn't help but be surprised. Massachusetts is over 600 kilometers away. The round trip hadn't even taken 2 minutes. How is Governor White? Someone couldn't help but ask. Governor White? You mean the guy who shoved his head into his anus? John pointed at the screen. My God. Everyone was horrified to see that White, who had hurriedly left earlier, was now back on the screen, his head stuck inside a pig's rear end, struggling painfully. If it weren't for the matching clothes, they probably wouldn't have recognized him. This is my new creation, John said with a smile, brain in an anus. What do you all think? Honestly, finding a pig near the governor's mansion is a waste of time, John complained. No one dared to speak. Some of the more sensitive but imaginative people even started gagging. I don't know if you've seen the movie Human Centipede, John said, stroking his chin, but directly sewing you up is too much trouble. How about we use White's method to form a circle around you? Upon hearing this, everyone's face changed. The thought of that horrific scene was worse than being killed. Moreover, after the Secretary of State and White's self-sacrifice, they had no doubt that John was capable of such a thing. Previously hesitant, they nodded vigorously, saying, I agree to your request. Ross, that guy Ross went too far. We agree to your conditions. I agree to your conditions. Looking at the leaders of the most powerful nation on earth, who possess the greatest wealth and power, yet groveled at his feet, John, having successfully exacted his revenge, suddenly felt a sense of boredom. It would be much more enjoyable to chat with Gwynn Stark, John thought inexplicably. Seeing everyone agree, Ellis could only nod, saying, there are too many people, I need some time to arrange things. I need to see results within 3 days, John said coldly, then added, now let's discuss the second condition. There's more? Everyone was shocked. The first condition had already given them a hard time, how many more were there? I need you to hand over all the most serious criminals serving life sentences in the entire United States to me. John's gaze swept over the people before him. A significant portion of them were likely scum, the kind who could advance their sentence by killing. Everyone present was stunned. Compared to the first condition, this one seemed still difficult to agree to. In the United States, the death penalty is generally not imposed, let alone having criminals directly handed over to John. Those death row inmates also have families. If their identities were exposed, the consequences would be far greater than those of these 1,000+ individuals. I don't care what methods you use, secretly handing them over, lowering the death penalty conditions, I need to receive 10,000 heads every month. Don't give me inferior ones. I need the first batch of death row inmates by the end of the month, and I want to be there to watch Ross die. John said coldly, then disappeared from the meeting room without saying anything more, leaving only the Statue of Liberty, this grand gift, lying amidst the ruins of the White House. After John left, Ellis sighed, we need to talk again about how to deal with this sort of Damocles hanging over our heads. This guy is a ticking time bomb, we need to make him more manageable. Chapter 48 Discussion? Flattery. Late at night, at the White House, countless staff members were repairing the structures damaged by John. Meanwhile, on the 6th basement level, a meeting regarding John was underway. We need to reassess his danger, Ellis said, his expression extremely serious, his voice even trembling slightly. Homelander is clearly a monster against humanity, and we need a force to check him. The others present didn't react to Ellis's assessment of John. Because if they were given superhuman abilities, they would undoubtedly be even more ruthless, but regarding the need for checks and balances, they all nodded in agreement. So, what do we need to do? A governor asked a crucial question. First, we need to minimize his influence, his negative influence, the vice president said calmly. Power, wealth, and love, it's a web from which no one can escape. Judging from his fury over Ross's actions, it's clear that Superman also has emotions and desires. In other words, we can use various desires to control him, to make him manageable. For example, everything that happened today must not be leaked to the media. Immediately block all news, and any negative comments online that might upset Homelander are strictly prohibited. You want to create a flawless god? Ellis asked doubtfully. Yes, to create a flawless image of him, to have the people praise him, and to have morality restrain him, the vice president explained, spreading his hands. If you have a clean white shirt, you won't want to get it dirty. Everyone in the meeting seemed thoughtful, and finally nodded in agreement. After the incident, I borrowed all the information SHIELD had collected about Homelander. I can say no one understands him better than me, the vice president said confidently, adjusting his glasses. In fact, if it weren't for Ross, things wouldn't have escalated to this point, resulting in the deaths of a governor, a secretary of state, and over a dozen agents. So I suggest that after Ross's execution, his assets be confiscated and transferred to Homelander's account, and then. I remember he had a daughter, right? I believe Homelander would be very interested in the assets, wife, and daughter of an enemy, the vice president said calmly. I have a question, the Speaker of the House questioned. How can you ensure that Homelander's physical condition is comparable to that of an average person? You know what I mean. If we find out that his spouse is too weak and dies before the event is over, they might vent their anger on us. Haven't you read Superman comics? How can you ask such a question? The vice president said, looking utterly bewildered. You want to talk about science? The Statue of Liberty couldn't possibly have flown at supersonic speeds without disintegrating. When Superman catches a plane, he'll just smash it to pieces. Anyway, just understand that he has a biological perspective that can solve 99% of life's problems, don't delve into the rest. The vice president took a deep breath. One more thing, you don't need to worry about being implicated if things go wrong. All the proposals I have mentioned above are my personal, willful ideas, and have nothing to do with you. Everyone stared at the vice president in shock, not expecting him to have such boldness. In fact, everyone had predicted that John's arrival would cause a massive power reshuffle. Positions that were previously difficult to advance in could now be easily obtained by gaining John's favor. But everyone hesitated, considering whether to board this ship. After all, John was unpredictable. In the past, at most, his mistakes would end his political career, but if he displeased him, he could be gone that very day. But there's still a problem, someone hesitated. Regarding the blocking of negative news about Homelander, we can only block it domestically, we can't hide it from other countries. How can we be sure they'll cooperate with us? Send a report on Homelander's actions today to the council and let them think it over, Rodriguez said calmly. We just need to mind our own business. Once Homelander enjoys the feeling of being universally supported, if any country doesn't cooperate, I believe Homelander will make that country cooperate. Now we should talk about how to fulfill his conditions, Rodriguez said, having unknowingly taken control of the entire meeting. I'll figure out how to deal with Ross and the others. He has a lot of dirt on that base, whether it's human experimentation or the unauthorized use of weapons of mass destruction. Legally dealing with them shouldn't be difficult, Ellis said, scratching his head. The problem now is that 10,000 criminals per month is just too many, and there are less than 10 days left until the end of the month. It's too rushed. It's simple, I have a great solution. In the video, a governor raised his hand and said, another expert. Everyone's eyes turned to him, wanting to see how he would handle the problem. Think about the Homelander's purpose in taking criminals, it's to eliminate them, of course. So what's the difference between American criminals and criminals in other countries? The governor asked. Hiss, you mean? Vice President Rodriguez gasped. Don't forget, a significant portion of our population is made up of immigrants. If we transfer death row inmates from other countries to us before their execution, we'll grant them U.S. green cards, and they'll be Americans. The governor flipped through the documents in his hand, saying, don't countries like Honduras and El Salvador have a large number of criminals? Let's help them. If we run out of Europe and America, we'll go to Africa. Every warlord there has 2 lives. With 7 billion people on Earth, our current criminal reserves are enough for Homelander to kill for over a decade. We don't need a few more criminals. Everyone was astonished by the governor's plan, but upon closer inspection, it seemed quite reasonable. It satisfied Homelander's demands without provoking too much opposition domestically. Very well, I'll handle the diplomatic affairs. President Ellis nodded, then looked at the vice president and said, domestic matters concerning Homelander and General Ross are your responsibility. If you're still alive by the next presidential election, my party and I will do everything in our power to elect you. Ellis patted Rodriguez on the shoulder in front of everyone on the video. Receiving this satisfactory promise, the vice president smiled and accepted it earnestly, saying, leave it to me, I'll handle it. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 49 Big Brother is watching you. Late at night, all the employees in the Daily Bugle building were working overtime to prepare tomorrow's news. There had been just too many major events today. From the battle between Abomination and the Nemesis, to Iron Man's attack on the military's betrayal of the Nemesis, to the Nemesis's resurrection and subsequent corruption, to the Midtown High School's Iron Legion, the news editors present were all in a frenzy. This was practically the day with the most material in New York City in a decade. They were certain tomorrow's newspapers would be packed with news, even the tidbits would be major. Watching his editors working overtime, James took a satisfied sip of coffee and said, "Very good, I hereby announce that everyone who works overtime tonight will have their end-of-month bonus doubled." Unexpectedly, their stingy boss was being so generous, and all the editors cheered. After everyone calmed down, James said, "I've already decided on the headlines for the Daily Bugle tomorrow morning." Leaning back in his chair, James raised his right hand, holding his coffee cup, and said, "Two terrifying demons clash on Broadway." And the subheadline, how about? James hesitated before saying, "The indescribable murderous monster wreaks havoc in New York." The third headline is "The despicable, shameless, and immoral thieves of the motherland steal America's symbol of freedom." James nodded repeatedly at his own creativity. "The first three headlines tomorrow will be like that." "Boss, isn't that a bit inappropriate?" an editor whispered. What's inappropriate about it?" James turned his head and said, "Do you have a better way to boost tomorrow's newspaper sales with headlines?" "No, it's just that, won't this offend the Nemesis too much?" the editor said with some lingering fear. "The reporters who went to the scene said that the Nemesis now kills without blinking an eye. What's there to be afraid of?" James smiled nonchalantly, but the next second the newspaper office door was kicked open, and a group of men wearing sunglasses and black clothes walked straight in. "Who are you?" James's face changed, and he questioned loudly. "The FBI, we're taking over your newspaper now." The leading man showed his identification. Hearing it was the FBI, everyone's expression changed. They hadn't expected the FBI to come knocking. James's angry expression immediately turned into a smile. "What do you want?" "It's simple. We'll be reviewing your newspaper tomorrow. All negative news about Homelander is prohibited." The FBI agent adjusted his sunglasses. "You're restricting our freedom of speech." An editor stood up and retorted, "Just following the law. If you have any complaints about specific issues, you can call and complain." The man said calmly, then led his men through the newspaper in front of them, their attention drawn to the draft headlines. "Two terrifying demons clash on Broadway? An indescribable murderous monster wreaks havoc in New York? A despicable, shameless, and immoral homeland thief steals America's symbol of freedom." Looking at the horrifying headlines, the FBI agent, who knew the inside story, thought these people were simply courting death. If he hadn't arrived early, the entire newspaper office would probably be destroyed by tomorrow morning. He casually tore the headline to shreds and stared seriously at James, saying, "I think the headline can be changed appropriately. What do you say? The supreme, holy, and mighty Homelander saved New York loyal to him yesterday?" "Of course, no problem. I think this headline is perfect." Jameson, who had previously been using various exaggerated headlines to slander New York, now clapped his hands with a warm smile. "Very good. I hope future headlines will follow my words. Also, be careful with your language in the videos. Regarding today's events, there's a confidentiality agreement you need to sign." The man produced a stack of paper documents. Under his pressure, everyone present reluctantly signed the documents. After everyone finished writing, the man revealed a satisfied expression. "Now that you've all signed the agreement, I hope you won't reveal too much about tonight's events to your families. If you cross the line, it will violate national security." He waved and led his men away from the newspaper office, preparing to head to their next target. Meanwhile, in Queens, New York, a teenager was constantly posting online about everything he'd witnessed at school during the day. "Really, I'm not lying to you. Kexingren is my classmate. I personally witnessed him brutally killing hundreds of fully armed enemies. Who believes you? I could say Kexingren is my boyfriend. What proof do you have, murdering hundreds of people? They were enemies. Why differentiate between brutality and not? So you weren't the one being protected, were you?" Hilarious. The poster is such an ingrate. He was clearly saved, Yet he's smearing people online. I couldn't do that. Seeing the online ridicule, the teenager's heart raced, but when he tried to post another message, he found his account had been banned. What the hell? Why would they lock us up if there's nothing wrong? The boy complained, but then heard a knock at the door. What the hell? The boy got up and went to open the door, but a man in black pointed a gun at him and said, "FBI investigation. Are you Tom?" "Wow, yes, I'm Tom. What's the problem?" The boy, with a gun pointed at him, immediately knelt down, leaning against the door frame and trembling uncontrollably. "Very well, you are suspected of endangering national security. Come with us." The FBI agent looked at Tom coldly and, despite his struggles, forced him into the car. "How many more are there?" the FBI agent driving asked. "About 37 more. Looks like you won't be getting any sleep tonight," the escorting agent muttered, then looked at the boy seriously and said, "Don't cause trouble. You've committed a serious crime, but after we come back for questioning, if there aren't any major issues, you can go back." What crime did I commit?" the boy, Tom, asked tremblingly, almost crying. "You are suspected of jeopardizing the glorious image of Homelander. If the circumstances are serious, you will be sentenced to 3 to 5 years in prison. You will not be released until you have deeply understood your problems in prison, otherwise, your detention will be extended." The agent, suppressing his sense of absurdity, read out the charges. What does this have to do with anything?" the boy gaped, never expecting such a clause to exist in the U.S. Constitution. Not only the newspaper and the boy, but countless people were sleepless tonight. With the combined efforts of the American leadership, all media outlets and police were receiving various warnings, overt or covert. Thanks to their efforts, when the sun shines again on America tomorrow, the great name of Homelander will once again be sung like gold. And any evil voices attempting to smear it will ultimately be brought to justice under the watchful eyes of law enforcement agencies like the FBI. Chapter 50. The Homelanders heroically defend the White House. In the pitch-black night, the clear moonlight was obscured by dark clouds. John, after leaving the White House, flew aimlessly until he returned to New York. High above, looking down at the myriad lights of the city below, a sense of desolation welled up within him. What should I do next? John pondered, yet had no clear goal. Ironically, coercing the leader of the most powerful nation on earth into agreeing to unequal terms hadn't brought him much pleasure. It was too easy as using an invincible cheat code in a video game. Throughout the entire process, only the revenge against Ross had piqued his interest. The other massacres and coercion were merely means to an end. John wouldn't regret killing, but he had no reason to feel excited about it either. After all, he wasn't a psychopath. Now that things are done, should I continue being a superhero? Forget it. I can already imagine how tomorrow's tabloids will fabricate stories about me. I've worked hard for months. I should rest and enjoy myself for a few days, John thought to himself. But, John began, Ancient One, I know you're watching, right? As soon as he finished speaking, a circle of light appeared out of thin air beside him. Inside the circle, Ancient One smiled and said, "You've changed a lot. This hasn't happened in any of the observations before today. You must have seen the missile incident, right? There must be a reason you didn't save me," John pondered. My past and future told you not to interfere, right? Ancient One was pleased that John wasn't being unreasonable and nodded. "You said you wanted to teach yourself a lesson, and you actually made such a big mistake because of your eagerness for quick success. Taking a missile hit will deepen your memory and help you avoid making the same mistake again." That tone of voice really sounds like me, John chuckled, not caring at all about the trouble he'd caused himself. After all, it was his decision. "But are you really not bothered?" John asked curiously. "Like today, I killed all sorts of people, and I expect to kill at least 10,000 people every month in the future. Are you really not bothered at all? This is just internal strife among humans. I won't interfere." Glee gently shook her head. "As long as it doesn't affect the survival of human civilization, I won't interfere." "Well, just like the system, I'm taking a laissez-faire approach, relying entirely on the host's self-discipline," John secretly scoffed. "Am I even human? Humans aren't limited to pure human genes. In some universes, humans are born with superpowers due to genetic differences. They are still human. Compared to them, you're just slightly stronger. As long as you consider yourself human, then you are." The Ancient One's gaze was profound, as if she saw through everything. She slowly said, John, I hope you become strong as soon as possible. When you can stand on your own, I can leave in peace. Come on, I never said I'd help you. Who knows what this universe will be like in 3 months? Maybe by the time I'm capable, I'll be out there already. John waved his hand dismissively. Let your future he's the best among us disciple handle it. The Ancient One didn't say much to John's refusal, but instead gave a knowing smile, leaving John bewildered. But do you really think I can do it? Solve the problems in the Marvel Universe? John asked doubtfully. In terms of combat power, even the strongest Superman is only multifaceted. Only showing off in the Marvel movies, and at most just a slightly stronger character in comics. Where did the Ancient One get the confidence that he could solve this problem? It's not about solving the root of the problem, it's just about getting you to do your best to protect humanity in this universe, the Ancient One said. We're already struggling to take care of ourselves, just being able to take care of ourselves is enough. And now, you don't need to think about so much, just follow the rhythm step by step. The Ancient One waved her hands and said, what you need to do now is go back and get a good night's sleep, and when you wake up tomorrow, all of New York will be singing your praises. I feel like you're mocking me, John smirked. Tomorrow he'd probably be singing infamy. With a wave of the Ancient One's hand, a halo enveloped John's body, and when he reappeared, he was back in his bedroom. John got up and went to the window, pulling back the curtains to see that Stacy's family across the hall was still brightly lit. John didn't want to use his super hearing to find out what was going on, so he pulled the curtains back up, looking at the dimly lit bedroom, remembering the Ancient One's words. Okay, things can't get any worse anyway. I'll just selectively listen to what that guy says. I'll get some sleep and see what happens tomorrow. John's thoughts raced, and his battle suit flowed like water, automatically detaching from his body and hanging on a hanger. He then flipped through the air, landing on a large bed, pulling the covers up and wrapping himself in them, beginning his first sleep in months. Homelander. 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 John Kent, we will always support you. Homelander, I love you. The next day, John was awakened by deafening shouts and cheers outside his window. Listening to the shouts outside, John rubbed his eyes, his mind still hazy as he thought, are those people outside idiots? Knowing my brutality, they still dare to block my house? Aren't they afraid of death? In his daze, he sat up in bed, glancing at the clock on the opposite wall, only to realize it was already 9 in the morning. Looks like I slept pretty well last night. John yawned, slipped on his slippers, went to the window, and pulled back the curtains. He was immediately shocked by what he saw outside. The entire street outside his house was completely surrounded by a crowd, everyone chanting his name, their eyes filled with fanatical worship. When they saw him pull back the curtains, the crowd became even more excited, their shouts almost shattering the glass. Homelander. Homelander is looking at me. He's watching me. I want to have your babies. What the hell? Somewhat startled by the crowd's enthusiasm, John quickly pulled the curtains back up. If 1 or 2 people still worshipped him after learning the truth, that would be normal, but surely tens of thousands outside had gone mad? Confused and bewildered, he decided to turn on the TV to see what was going on. But as soon as he turned it on, he was stunned by the latest news. The headline at the bottom of the screen read, Thugs launch midnight attack, Homelander protects the White House from falling, Wandifa? John was stunned when he saw the title, wondering if he had accidentally entered some parallel universe where he was the good guy. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.